favorite
Wiley
pine
Nichols?
cone shirt.
Air Force One of the president.
Just this president?
Vintage, I think.
He came
The
in?
words you were speaking.
He didn't invite me to that. He invited me to his fundraising thing last week.
I think it was the first shirt I purchased when I got elected. It's very exciting. Mm.
Started every meeting. It was supposed to, whether you hear it.
It is. It's kind of fun to
Don't
watch
see
the
anybody else.
evolution.
He mentioned swimming, so I think they do.
Anne's
The
not
recycling
even
into my
on her way.
No, it's good.
Huh?
Yeah, fun.
I know. Okay, all right, I think we're gonna get ready to get started. It is a little bit 6:02. We're expecting 2 more council members. So I will declare the Morrisville Town Council work session meeting of March 30th, 2023 now open. And we have 3 items on our agenda tonight. First is an advisory committee application process review. And we have an advisory committee work plan review. And then finally, our first budget, our 2024 budget outlook. So I'm gonna make a suggestions, since I think the budget conversation's gonna be kind of long. How about we try to do the first 2 items in an hour? I'll do a check-in at 7 o'clock and we'll see where we're at, and hopefully we can wrap and then move to the budget. So I will try to keep us on target. The other thing, remember to keep your mics on. We have different mics here tonight. Make sure they're in front of you when you speak. There's been some concern about on the recording being able to hear, so keep that in mind. And as we learned the other night, these mics are even these are very sensitive. Even I can hear it, so you want to maybe be careful with. I know we have some fabulous snacks in front of us, so be careful with the snacking as well, or the crinkling of the bags. So, okay, I'm going to turn the first item over to Town Clerk Smith for our advisory committee application and process review.
All right, thank you so much. Talking to Mayor Pro Tem Johnson before the meeting, it dawned on me that we may want to take a second to just enjoy this moment, because I think this will be one of the few times you get a presentation where a staff member isn't asking for money or discussing the budget or funding, so let's just enjoy it for a second before we get started.
Good point.
Very nice.
Okay, so advisory committee application and appointment review. Okay, the advisory committee application has grown in size over the past couple of years based upon town council request and due to the new committees that we've created over the recent years. This session is just going to give council the opportunity to review the current application, just to ensure that the questions that are listed are beneficial and still useful in your application review process. Our goal during this review is for council to, of course, review the applications, and then we would like council to either confirm the proposed changes or provide further updates that they may like to see take place regarding the application form. You all should have hard copy versions of the committee applications for the town of Apex, the town of Cary, and the town of Morrisville. They are in that order. They're also here on the screen and here behind you. That way you have multiple sources to view it. We're going to briefly go over the Apex and Morrisville applications just because I wanted to provide a comparative base for your review of the Morrisville application. Once we review the Apex and Cary applications, I'm going to present the proposed updates that staff recommends for the Morrisville application, and then I'm going to ask for council feedback. Council can provide further edits. They can accept the proposed changes. It's all at council's discretion. So we're going to jump right into the town of Apex application. Their application does have 8 required questions and 1 optional question. I'll just go through them briefly. The first, which board are you interested in serving on? How did you hear about this opportunity to serve? Name, email, address, and phone number. Do you live within the Apex town limits? Do you live within the town's extraterritorial jurisdiction? Tell us why you would like to serve. Please list any education, special skills, or experience that you have that will be useful while considering this form. If you now serve or have previously served on any boards, commissions, or committees, please list the committees and dates served. The one optional question on this application is the employer and the job title. There was just a few areas that I wanted to highlight on their application. The first being that the town of Apex doesn't refer to this as their application form. They refer to it as an interest form. And while their application is short, you may notice that throughout their application, they use the word serve multiple times. It's listed 5 times throughout their application. As we've mentioned before, words always matter. I feel as though when you submit an application, when you apply to something or submit an application, you typically expect something in return, whereas when you submit an interest form or you're serving, there's kind of a focus on the community service aspect. So I thought that was just an interesting word usage on their application. The Town of Cary Advisory Committee application has 4 required questions and 10 optionals. It was very interesting that the majority of their questions were optional questions. The first being the name, then email and address, and phone number. The third being an ethics review clause, just states that after reviewing the guidelines for the boards and commissions, do you have any potential concerns about serving on the citizen advisory group for which you're applying? And the fourth question is, which board would you like to apply to? Select up to 3. They do have optional questions. The first being, which district do you live in? Employer, job title, basic description of duties, age, gender, race, ethnicity, the number of years you have lived in Cary, the reasoning for your interest, which could include lived experiences, qualifications, skills, attributes, and any other information that might distinguish the candidate during the review. Question number 6 asks them to list any governmental board, commission, or committee that they are currently serving on or have served on. These could be in the town of Cary or elsewhere. Please note any relevance to the board of which you are applying. And I do apologize, that was a duplicate there. 7 and 8 are the same question. 9, please list any non-governmental experience. And number 10, how did you become aware of this volunteer opportunity with the town of Cary? You'll see there are some similarities between the town of Cary and the town of Apex, and also the town of Morrisville, which we're going to get to next. The town of Morrisville application has 15 required questions with an additional 7 questions for the Public Education Advisory Committee, 3 for the Smart City Steering Committee, and an additional 1 question for the Senior Advisory Committee. When you compare it with the town of Cary and Apex, obviously ours is visually longer. This is in most part due to those additional required questions for Public Education and Smart City, and also Senior Advisory. And this is the Morrisville application is 2 pages. Did you guys want me to read all of these? I know we're kind of pushing for time. I can go through them if you'd like me to.
Are there any that we've added in the last year or 2? Like the question about the immediate family member, I think that was recently added 2 years ago or something.
That was, I'm not really clear on the ones that were added 2 to 3 years ago. Those Smart City questions were added. Yeah, I think that's going to be the only additional one. Unfortunately, our software doesn't allow for the tracking of the changes, so that could be something that we could document moving forward. But within the software, the changes are just made, and it kind of deletes the previous iteration of the application.
Very good, thank you.
Are we good on this one? Okay. I will move forward. I do ask that you specifically look at this number 7. Within our application, the 7th question down gives a charter acknowledgement statement. It states, it is recommended that you review the approved charter of the advisory committee that you have selected to gain a greater understanding of the role and scope of the work. Please acknowledge that you have read and reviewed the charter found at, and then it lists the address. I just want you to note that because we're going to discuss that on the next slide. So we thought that the need for applicants to review the charter so they can actually have an understanding of what the committee does needed to be put to the forefront. So prior to submitting an application, staff recommends that this charter acknowledgement statement be removed from the body of the application and placed on a standalone page that requires a click-through in order for you to proceed towards the application. We also suggest that the acknowledgement statement be updated from a recommendation to a full acknowledgement, and that acknowledgement statement would go as follows. I hereby acknowledge that I have read the approved charter of the advisory committee I have selected to gain a greater understanding of the role and scope of their work. So this is more of a logistical change. When they go to apply, the first screen that they see will be this charter acknowledgement. They'll acknowledge the charter, and then they'll be allowed to pass through to the actual application, just to put it at the forefront.
Just a quick question, Eric. Does anybody ever apply, through paper application versus online?
In my time here, I facilitated one paper application
Okay,
where I assisted them only because they were having computer issues and
got it.
so
So you would help with this part if that was
Yeah,
ever
exactly.
happened? Got it.
I walked them through the process over the phone and filled it out for them. So it wasn't even paper. I just did the online portion because they were having issues.
Okay.
So I find it challenging to find the charters on the website. So if you could have the link to the charter pages, the page of charters or something like that before, that they can go to right away. If they go, oh, I didn't do that, I didn't look at that. That could be maybe part of the application paragraph before they even initiate.
We could add that
You
link
know,
to this page
Because
also.
I know it's redundant, but I think it would be very helpful for them to have that opportunity to do that quick lookup before they initiate the application or information.
Be like a link right on that
Yeah,
page.
right
Yep.
there.
We
you
could
know.
do that.
That's good.
So do I have council consensus regarding this charter acknowledgement? Because this is kind of separate from the actual application itself, so I wanted to leave it as a standalone item.
I saw two, not in my head, so that's three. Are we all
As
good
long
with
as
that?
they can find it.
Yeah, we can put it direct, because previously it was
I'm good.
linked in the, it was linked here, so we can just move that link.
Okay. To the first step.
Okay, we have a comment from Mayor Cawley too. Oh, he
He's just
expressed
expressing
his-
his support, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, good. Thank you,
Okay.
Eric.
Yes, ma'am. And we're going to move forward to the meat of the document. I don't believe I provided a red line only because I was having
did.
issues. I did give you a red line?
Oh,
Is it red?
Oh, it's red.
When I initially printed it just a moment ago, it wasn't showing the red. It was just in black. So I said, let me put it here
It's
also.
beautiful. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So for the first 4 questions, these are just the proposed changes that we have. Of course, council can make updates. They can do whatever they would like to the application at their discretion. These are just some staff recommendations that we think that would assist in giving the same information, but just reducing the length of the actual application. So question 1 through 3 would remain the same: name, email address, phone number. How long have you been a resident of Morrisville? Question 4 through 5, which boards would you like to apply to serve on? Select up to 2. And if you notice there, we did change which boards would you like to apply for to serve on. Question 5 initially was which board or committee is your first choice? Question 3 was, I apologize, question 6 was which board or committee is your second choice? Staff did recommend that questions 4 through 5 be merged into one question because we would ask that applicants submit one application per committee that they would like to serve on, only because there's difficulty in tracking the various committees that they're applying to. You may have one, their first choice may have a vacancy, whereas their second choice doesn't have a vacancy. So I have to archive a portion of their application.
So it's one per committee.
One application per committee.
And in your instructions, before they even get to this, you should say there's one application or interest form per committee. Up to 2 can be accepted in any rolling calendar, whatever is your cycle, right? So that way that you can keep everything even and they can know that they can submit twice.
And also in contacting, when I would contact the applicants just to confirm that they still showed interest, a good majority of them could not recall the second and third committees that they had applied to in the first place. So,
And therefore it's easier
just-
with that one-to-one relationship, yeah.
any more questions? Okay.
So I got a question.
Yes, sir.
When I just think of it, like I don't see either the charter has it, which days are the meetings, because I want to ensure that when they're randomly saying, okay, these 2 committees, because we have seen a pattern where people pick every committee that they can get onto.
And
So,
on the application page, prior to clicking apply, there is a calendar that shows, at the very top of the page, there's a calendar that shows the days. On the actual application itself, it doesn't show those dates, but prior to clicking that apply now button on our committee page, it does list the individual meeting dates for the committee.
Yeah, because we want a commitment from them that they can
We,
make it.
we could highlight that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Or within the individual application, we could possibly put the meeting dates in there. That would be a quick update.
And also like their attendance policy, which someone, because upfront, let's be honest to them.
Why would, one question, why would we want to, just curious?
Steve, do you have a mic in front of you?
Yeah, it's picking up.
Oh, sorry.
One over there. Yeah, just make sure we need to make sure we're all being heard, that the audio recording is picking us up.
One quick question. What was the reasoning of eliminating the question of why you want to serve on the board or committee? I mean, isn't that something, or are we gathering?
You know, we're gonna, I was gonna touch on that. That was my next topic, actually. My next.
I would want to know that.
Question 7 that you were referring to was, why do you want to serve? To what value do you add? That question was more just based upon the opinion that asking why they want to serve seemed as though they were seeking to gain something from it themselves versus what value would you add to the community. Just focusing on that community service aspect versus same way that we said applying versus serving. It just places more emphasis on that community service aspect versus asking, why do they want to serve on the committee?
I like how it flips
Service.
the situation.
It puts the focus on service, which I think would help the committees overall. It would help with attendance. It would help having quorum if people understand that this is a position in which your focus should be serving the community. Any more questions on that one before I move forward? Okay. Question number 8. What do you see as the primary responsibility of the board and committee? As you notice, the second half of that question, what do you hope to accomplish as a member of the board and committee? We did remove that. The reason for removing it is that staff felt as though it would be difficult for an applicant to understand what they could accomplish if they don't understand the capabilities of the committee, or if they don't understand what the committee could accomplish. So we felt that question would kind of be difficult for them to answer. So we did remove that portion of the question, but we did leave what do you see as the primary responsibilities of the committee, which is kind of in line with the portion that we removed. Question 9.
Hang on 1 second.
Sorry, Mayor Colley has a comment related to applications. Mayor Colley?
Thank you, Deputy Town Manager. I was just wondering if the council was interested in revisiting real quick if we want to limit the number of committees or boards that an applicant can do in a rolling calendar. Councilmember Scroggins-Johnson kind of brought it up. I'm sure that we want to limit them, or if we're going to leave that a little bit more open. Thank you.
They can serve on one. I thought they could apply to 2.
I think he was referring to, Mayor Colley, were you referring to the number of applications they can submit in a period?
Yeah, I think in the past we said you could rank your first 3 choices. Now it's 2, and now we're making a hard stop at 2. Is that the council's intention? Because someone might want to be
he's asking
on 3
should there
different
be a limit?
committees if they're available.
I would say that, are you asking, should there be a limit to the number of applications an applicant can submit over a given period?
Yeah, that's what I heard Johnson say. I don't know if that was her intention. I just want to make sure that we're all clear about what we do want.
So I'm okay with, so we right now limited to 2 choices. So they should be able to submit up to 2 applications and stop right there. That would be equivalent to what we're kind of doing right now.
And getting more granular, they can only have 2 applications in your system at a time. If they want to switch, they have to withdraw one and submit another. So
We are
only
removing that too.
Yes, but Eric, yes, we are removing that from the application itself, but Eric said an applicant could submit 2 separate applications for 2 different committees. So they could still apply. Am I repeating that correctly?
Right, multiple.
That's correct. Yeah, they can do they can show interest in multiple committees. It's just that there's difficulty in tracking when there's because even the way that this is set up, we've had some people select 3 committees. They select their first application, then the software doesn't distinguish between, they already selected this one, so let's remove it from the remaining selections. So it allows them to make those 2 extra selections, which creates difficulty tracking in the back end. For instance, if they apply for public education and environment, but environment doesn't have any vacancies, but public education does, that application is then kind of split where one is being archived, the other isn't being archived. It just creates a difficulty in tracking and getting the information to council.
So what guarantee do I have if I'm applying for 2 that I will get something? There's no guarantee on that. So
Yeah,
why
but-
can't I apply more? Because if the guy wants to, or guy or person or lady wants to serve, they can apply, because why are we limiting to just 2? There's no guarantee that, we know our policy will allow only 1, right? So we have seen people do all, or any, like, they want to just get in.
That policy could be changed at council discretion, but I based it off the 2 because that's what the current.
Sorry for that. And I think this was actually before Eric. You did used to allow people to apply for every committee. And what we found is when the clerk would go back and determine interest, there really wasn't interest after 1 or 2, which is why council put the 2-person limit in several years ago, or 2 committee limit.
So this it helps Eric with his tracking, number 1. And number 2, like what Vicki just said, an applicant could withdraw 1 application and submit another one for a different committee if they want.
Keep that 2 in the system, yeah.
I think it's okay to keep it at a max of 2 as well. Here's the other thing, and I always say this too. We're going to come back and tweak this again over time. In the future, council's going to look at it and tweak it some more. So, at some point you gotta kind of bite the bullet, try it, and if it's not working, we'll tweak it again. And we'll know soon enough if it does what we hope it does, this whole process, or not. So we can always tweak things.
What's the reason for not having people just reapply if they're interested every cycle for the committees that are open? I mean, because to me, if somebody is applying and they want to be on the education committee, in a cycle where there's no education committee open, there's no point. And if they, and when the education committee comes available, then
So I think Eric's going to talk a little bit about that, why that might be helpful, if I'm correct, Eric. After we get through this part of it, he's going to talk a little bit about that. It might make sense, but we can come back to that, Ann. I think
And also, it may help if, when we review this application, we reviewed it as an entire document. So when I looked at question number 5 and added that was based upon other questions that follow in the application. So once you hear the entirety of the application, it may make a little bit more sense why we constructed it the way that we did. Questions 10 and 11, have you served on other town boards and committees? And have you attended any previous board and committees? These were just merged into one question. It just seemed easier to merge them into a single question. We did leave the next 3 required questions. Have you completed Morrisville 101? Are you an immediate family member of a current Town of Morrisville Advisory Committee appointee? And do you have any personal interest or business interest that could create a conflict of interest? So those are all for the questions that are required of all applicants. Moving on to the questions that are specifically for Morrisville Public Education Advisory Committee. The first question, in what geographical electoral district do you reside? Of course, that one needs to remain on so we can ensure that we have the correct number of the correct number of appointees per district.
So, Eric, I think it might be confusing to a active resident what a geographical electoral district is.
And to clarify, I didn't want to bombard you with so much information, but on the application, there is a map that shows you and explains what it is. I just didn't want to take up half of the page showing that.
Right.
But it does explain what the districts are, and it gives them a big map so they can find their location.
Could you add the word Morrisville in that, just because it is different for the town as it is maybe for other electoral districts? So they just knew Right, but it needs to just say, this is the Morrisville one. If the map says Morrisville, that's fine,
I can't say clearly if the map says Morrisville. I looked at it so
Okay.
many times, I'm not sure. So it's a map of Morrisville, but I don't know if it says Morrisville at
Right.
the top. But that's a very easy change we
yeah.
can make.
But it's, our map lines change all the time. I think it might be confusing to them that we actually want the one for the town, not the one for the state or the one for the county or something.
Okay, question 2, please explain why you're interested in this committee and what value and experience you would add that would make you a good candidate. This question was kind of split into two. We thought that ask of what value you bring was a really good question, so we put that in the required questions up here as question number 5. And then the second portion that says, what experience do you have, we split that down into a separate question as question number 2. So the question asking why are you interested in what value and experience was moved up to the top, and then the experience portion was added as question number 2. Please describe your public education involvement, participation experience. And one thing that we did notice, if you notice that questions 3 through 7, the question 3, do you currently have school-aged children? 4, what grade levels? 5, please share the school names you are involved in. 6, please share the school calendar types that you're involved in. 7, if you selected other for any of these answers above, please take an opportunity to share additional details and explanations here. We did remove those questions as we felt that it could be incorporated within question number 2. And just from a data point, for the previous 2 cycles that we did, the question, please explain why you're interested in what value, it incorporated responses that would have responded to all of these questions in the previous 2 cycles. 100% of the applicants listed this information within the previous question. So we felt that it would just, it would be more beneficial just to reduce it down to these 2, the number 2 here and the number 5 that's been added to the required applicants. For the Smart City, moved a little too fast. For the Smart City Steering Committee application, once again, question 1 was removed as we've already placed that up here in question 5. What value do you add to the committee you are interested in serving in? Question number 2, how many years of technical experience do you have? We just reduced that question. I would hope that those applying to the committee would have a basic understanding of what the types of technical experience there are. So we just removed this additional wording here. And number 2.
We should put a note there that technical experience is not necessarily required to serve on that committee. If the only thing is going to be how many, which I'm fine with, the only question being how many years of technical experience you have. But I think that it should be clear that technical experience isn't a requirement, because we've always said that technical experience isn't a
In
requirement.
fact, we want to have a couple
Right.
non-technical.
And I think we did discuss that initially, but this question was when the committee was first formed. I think there was a desire for the members to have some technical experience, but we did discuss, I do recall discussing for future iterations that we remove, that we make it known that the technical experience is not required. So I can add a disclaimer there in parentheses saying that technical experience is not required if council would like me to do so.
Or, I don't know, just throw this out there, or, that, yeah, however we get there, or just reword the question to,
The
Well, I could-
technology industry or something, you know?
We could put it to, please describe your,
Experience including any technical experience.
no, I don't know,
Well,
never
how's
mind,
it
I
any
stopped myself.
different than the question number 7? Please describe your community involvement and participation experience.
Yeah, that might give you may or may not talk about, well,
Think about when you're selecting and appointing people to that committee, would it be valuable to you to know that someone is even technical going forward? I think it would be helpful to me to know if we have different experience levels, and I'm not going to get that unless we ask a similar question.
so go back, I like it, I'm sorry, Ann was right, I should just put a disclaimer there, technical experience is not
And that covers it.
an absolute requirement or a requirement,
but
but
we could
or it's not a
wordsmith that, so-
eliminating factor or something to that.
I understand you're trying to streamline. We're
We can
just,
wordsmith it for
yeah.
you to meet, I think we can come with something that'll meet your needs, so we can take care of that.
Some ideas on that.
And number 2 does remain the same. Explain your technical experience below if applicable.
Oh, there you go.
What's the difference between those two questions exactly?
The first specifically asks for how many years of technical experience, and then the second, explain your technical experience below.
I think you just need to have the second one.
Yeah, I agree.
I would agree with that too.
So just the second one?
With the
Yeah.
disclaimer.
Because hopefully they would
Yeah, that
include that. They would
simplifies.
say,
What do you mean by
I've been,
technical experience?
The technical experience was networking, data analytics, application development, things of that nature.
Do we-
Those specific questions were developed when the committee was initially founded because there was a need for that type of knowledge. So we placed an emphasis on making sure that we had those skill sets.
Or you can just put,
Explain the level of it.
An EG?
remove the word technical, explain your experience related to smart city steering committee. So that basically you're taking that out. You don't need a disclaimer. And basically ask them how are you related or can correlate yourself with this.
so explain your experience, your smart city experience below if applicable.
Absolutely, because you're in a committee, you have to contribute in some form or shape. No, we're not saying technical or non-technical. How can you contribute?
Or explain any experience related to
could
the
be a
smart city
user.
steering.
Right, that's right.
Explain the
Yeah.
extent of your.
So-
You don't need to have, I don't know.
You don't need to have a degree. You could be somebody who's a user of and could
Right,
bring
right.
great
Yeah,
value.
stupid.
Interested in,
Or explain any relevant experience
yes.
under,
Yeah, that's it.
Relevant.
explain any relevant experience. I think that
Yes.
would kind of just, because you may have experience that's not technically technical, but could be relevant to the Smart City Steering Committee. So if we were to put explaining relevant experience, it would kind of leave it open-ended
Yeah.
for
That
their
way,
interpretation.
it's relevant to smart city.
So you were going to bring this back to us before we adopt it? So we'll wordsmith that out, and then we'll do a thumbs up or down when you bring it.
This red line is really helpful, Eric.
Yeah, it took a while.
I think you should, I mean, I'm being, don't sigh, Steve.
It's okay.
But I have an issue with saying, what do you have explain your relative experience in the smart city. I mean, because if they're applying, they're going to say, oh, well, I take that to say, oh, I haven't been on the smart city committee. I have zero experience. And that's not what we're looking for. We should say relevant. I don't know. I just have an issue with putting the experience with the.
Somehow we need to get the word serve in there, because what experience can you contribute to serve on this committee or something?
I mean, this is a very specific.
We could kind of incorporate question 5. What experience do you have that would add value to the Smart City Steering Committee, or that would
Yes,
add value?
I like that.
I like that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank goodness this is being recorded, so in case you forget.
Poor Eric.
It'd be like that.
Like a test, like a definition test.
Very good.
That's why it takes a team to hash it out.
Okay, and the questions for senior advisory, just that the applicant must be 55 years of age or older, that one is going to remain the same. And the optional questions, please indicate race and also attach any information that you would like to have considered with your application, which is typically just a resume.
Why do we need their race? That comes out
Um,
of nowhere.
I'm not sure. I think this could just be for demographic tracking. I've reached out to other clerks in other municipalities. I haven't had the chance to discuss it with them yet, but it is a question that's present on. Not saying that since it's there, it should be here also, but I did go back and forth in my mind about the question on indicate race, but I just felt that it could possibly be used for future, the data could be used in the future to say, hey, what type of diversity are we having on our boards and committees? So that's one of the only reason that I felt that it may be a good data point to collect over time.
I just think if we're going to ask one, we should ask them all or ask none. Like, why are we
But it's
specifically?
listed as an optional question for all applicants.
Right, but I'm saying that why are we specifically asking about race? We're not asking about gender identity. We're not asking about age. We're not asking any other clarifying questions or demographic questions.
Why include
I
one
think
versus?
that's hanging out there as
So I could make I could make a suggestion. I would see it being easier to either remove the question in its entirety, or the town of Cary does ask the question. I think theirs includes race, gender, and other
Yeah,
identifying.
include-
Yeah,
subjects.
they do. They have
Include all of
age,
it.
gender, race, and ethnicity.
Exactly. So
Right.
if council would like us to remove it as a whole, we could, or we
No, I
could
would
just
add that
increase
one.
it.
I think we should increase it, as optional, but just think that one question is not good to just.
And how are we, so, I get that it would allow us theoretically to go back and make sure that our advisory committees are diverse. Do we in fact do that? Do we do a diversity review of the advisory committees?
We have
Yeah,
no
we have-
way to do that at this time.
So this is a new question.
Yeah, this question has remained. This isn't a new question. This has been on there, but we haven't done any type of diversity review of the advisory committees that I'm aware of.
So I think, to Ann's point, I think we all take all of this information and then use it individually the best we can. But there's no like quotas, there's no, so I will tell you, for me, I do look at that. I look at who's on the committees now and, are they heavily this way or the other way? And is there some qualified candidate that can help with that diversity? But we might probably all be doing that on our own versus any kind of concerted effort by
But to
staff.
your point, if we did add the additional questions in the future, once we build a pool of applicants that have been processed, we could do a review of the diversity on the committees based upon the information received. It would allow for a future
I would
review.
say add them all, and I agree with Ann.
And I think Mayor
Either
Collins-
it's an all or nothing. You can't just kind of,
Can't cherry.
yeah, yes.
So Mayor Colley has commented that he supports the carry question to support our DEI tracking in the future.
That's right.
I would agree.
I agree.
If we align with Carrie, then it's consistent.
Put a veteran question on there too.
A veteran question?
Yeah.
The council want a veteran question added?
I like that.
Veteran status.
I like that.
Optional. You talking
All
under
optional. Yeah, I think all demographic questions should be optional.
Mhm.
Now, this is a clean version of what the application would look like. Of course, there's been some changes made during the
I
discussion.
don't see my other demographic questions.
Yeah, I'm
on
sorry.
there.
I'm not that fast. But this is what it should look like. Of course, you see it's reduced to a little bit over a half a page versus the one in maybe a 10th page that we previously had. But I still think that it provides the information beneficial for council to make their choice and selection. Any other
Good job.
questions on the application?
Yeah,
form
we're all
before
good
we
with the application so far, and we'll come back to your question
move
about
forward?
whether we keep these applications on file or not, and when we go probably through this next part. But we're all good so far?
Okay, the next portion of this presentation is going to be the appointment process. This is referring to the actual appointment process from that initial recruitment to the appointment opening to the appointment. So this is incorporating that entire process. Currently, our appointment process includes inconsistent term dates for members. We have an increased number of appointments, and there's a limited time for applicant recruitment, application review, and application processing. Staff wanted to propose or recommend an update to the process. This update would create consistent term dates. It would enhance town council's ability to review the applicants, and it would also increase the time for application review and processing. So staff would like to ask for council to review the updated appointment concept and provide feedback. This is a high-level concept that's being proposed, so we just want some type of direction on whether to proceed with the concept, for council to make recommendations on the concept, or we could just leave the current process as it is. I just wanted to highlight some of the current issues. Due to the staggered appointments, we have the vacancies that are created through resignations and terminations. We have some pretty inconsistent term dates across our committees, which leads council to complete 3 to 4 appointment cycles throughout the year. If you notice here, I'll just use public education as an example. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate term expiration dates across their committee. I think MESC has 6 or Parks has 6. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different dates of expiration for terms across the committee. Over time, this could become even more inconsistent as we have more resignations or terminations. So these dates could become even more inconsistent and increase the need for a review cycle by council.
So if I can suggest, like, let's use only 2 dates, like staggering, because if someone resigns or if I'm exposed, they will fulfill only that remaining term, not the whole. Otherwise, you'll get into the
Yeah, and
spiral.
that's part of what we want. We want to incorporate that also.
Yeah,
to
the date,
assist.
the seat should have a set date,
Yeah.
like our seats do.
Yeah.
They have a set date.
Similar
and-
to PZB.
And everybody, we stick to that date, and if you've come in and you're only in for 3 months, well, then that seat's up again, or whatever the situation is. Yeah, I think we need to,
That's great. And that
Totally
that
agree.
is addressed further,
Yep.
further in the presentation. We do address that.
Or the seat doesn't get filled if there's only 3 months left in the seat. I mean,
well, that's true too.
Yeah.
every seat on every committee doesn't have to be filled.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you can go.
Wait for the next go-round of appointments. Yeah.
And yeah, we're going to touch on all these topics. You guys are right on top of it. The current issues that we have, the first being the unfilled vacancies. Due to the resignations and terminations, we have seats that can sit unfilled for an extended period of time, waiting for the next appointment cycle to take place. Town council is only allotted a 2-week period to review the applicants for committee appointments. That's that limited time that I was discussing. There's a lack of focused recruitment. Due to the short, rapid recruitment periods throughout the year, staff's ability to engage the community is greatly reduced when we only have 2 to 3 weeks to properly facilitate outreach. And also there's issues related to committee training and committee work plans. It's really difficult for committees to develop and establish a work plan when they have ongoing changes in committee membership. And it's also difficult to onboard those members, put them through new member orientation, get them onboarded to the committee when they're popping up at 4 times throughout the year. Let me know if I'm speaking too fast. I know I want to try and stay close to my time. So we do have some proposed process improvements. We have 3 goals for the improvements. The first, that we wanted to make sure we ensure the town council keeps direct appointment authority for our committees, but we also wanted to reduce the need to review a complex application 3 to 4 times throughout the year. This would also increase the time allotted for council review from 2 weeks to 1 month. So we want to extend that time for you all to review the application. And it would also implement a process to fill vacancies outside of a large-scale appointment cycle. So as you mentioned, if someone were to resign, rather than that vacancy sitting open for 3 months, it'll give us a method to fill that vacancy in the interim period.
Could we implement something where, like, people that have applied, I often don't, I mean, I guess maybe the 1 month would help this, but I often don't get time to talk to everyone that wants to have, that has applied. What if we invited them to come and speak during public comment? And, so they could talk about why they want to be on which committee, what their experience is. They could tell us all at the same time. And then, at least you wouldn't be just picking a name or looking at a resume.
Understood. We could do that at council
I've always
discretion.
felt like that.
One of my concerns would be that I know personally I'm not a very good speaker, so I may not, if I were to come give my comment during public comment, it may not be conveyed as well as someone else that is given a similar comment. So I would wonder if that would have some type of impact on, on the decision that was being made. That would be my only concern with doing that during an open meeting that's being streamed live also.
So to kind of get to that, then do we encourage them to reach out to council too?
Now
Outside of the application process? I mean, they can,
we could do that, but I will say that some of these questions, they're outside of the process updates that we're doing, so we can definitely add these in, but these aren't going to be directly incorporated inside the process updates. So we can definitely take those suggestions and add them in later also. So I did want to give you just a quick overview of a refresher of the current appointment process. This is the most recent process. On January 4th, we opened the submission window. On the 24th, you received the administrative report regarding the recruitment. On the 1st, that window was closed. On the 6th of February, we delivered an application packet to council. On the 13th, the ballots were returned to the town clerk. And on February the 14th, we presented those ballots to the town council for their approval. As you notice, this is a really condensed process, and it takes place at a really rapid pace. So we did propose some updates to the appointment process. We did propose a single annual appointment. This is just an appointment example that we developed just based off of some dates. This, of course, could change at council's discretion if they wanted to move forward with this. On May 4th, we would recommend that the recruitment begin with a kickoff at Springfest, with additional recruitment throughout the summer at various town events. We will also work in collaboration with the communications staff to provide educational opportunities to the community so they can better understand the role of our committees. This expanded recruitment window doubles our recruitment window from 4 weeks to 8 weeks, which gives us a whole lot more time just to engage with residents. On August the 1st, Town Council would receive an application packet for review. On September the 1st, Town Council will be asked to submit completed ballots with the following selections. The first selection Town Council would be asked to make is to select the candidates that they would like to fill the current vacancies and expiring terms with the November 1st appointment date. So this will be very similar to the process that we facilitate now. You know there's vacancies, you know there's expiring terms. We ask you to select members or select applicants to fill those seats. But the second, and which will be the biggest change to the process, is that within that ballot, we would include all the applicants that have submitted packets to the various committees, but we would ask council to select all applicants that they deem eligible for future appointment. And those applicants within that additional selection that receive 4 or more votes of the town council would be added to a database of appointment eligible council. So basically, instead of splitting up the appointment cycle to 3 to 4 cycles over the year, we would ask that council use their same criteria to identify applicants eligible for appointment, but we want you to do it in one single setting so we can develop a pool of applicants that council has already pre-selected. In October, town council will be asked to approve those November 1st appointments via consent agenda at their second town council meeting. And on November 1st, the appointments would begin for all new members. Throughout November, the advisory committee members would take place in their training. This would align their training. We could all participate in one annual training, and support staff would go through the process of onboarding the new members. And within November and December, each committee would select new leadership, and they would also start work on their, work plan development. This would could possibly lead to council receiving those work plans far earlier in January or maybe February, depending upon the schedule of the committee, versus receiving it, late March or April.
So Eric, just to stop there 1 minute, because, so you're talking about doing it like an alternate pool.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily say it, while it is an alternate, I hesitate to use the word alternate because it may kind of make that applicant seem less eligible than the initial applicants. But right now, town council receives 3 different applicant packets throughout the year, and they select 5 from here, 5 from here, 5 from here, 5 from here. We just ask that in one annual appointment, you select 20 applicants. You select the ones you want for the initial November 1st appointment, and then you select 15 remaining applicants that you could see being pointed to the committee at a future time. And I'll explain why we do this on the next slide. Let me know if I'm speaking too fast. I'm trying to.
No, you're doing fine, so you take your time.
And there were a few considerations that we thought that council may have questions regarding, so we want to go ahead and answer some of those more obvious questions. Vacancies that are created throughout the year due to the resignations and terminations, staff will be able to quickly fill those vacancies using the pre-selected pool of candidates that council has already voted. You've already looked at them. You've already approved them for appointment. So if we were to have a resignation at the beginning of March, by March 14th, the consent agenda item could go before council to appoint one of their eligible applicants to one of the vacant seats. So
What if there's more than one eligible candidate that was?
there was some discussion on how we would select, what type of hierarchy, whether it would be based upon the number of votes they received, whether it would be based upon the time that they submitted their application. That's one of those ideas that we would have to flesh out if council wanted to proceed forward. But we did think about that issue. If there were multiple applicants, how would we go about selecting that without that council?
Are you not giving, where are you giving the opportunity of a person who applied in between that window?
In between what, I'm sorry?
In between the windows of it's not in the pool. But
Well, yeah, if you don't-
it's a rolling calendar, right? You keep on submitting at any time.
The applicants are, and I'm gonna explain that in the next slide if you let me get to that. I don't want to get off track with the concept, but I'll explain that. Well, no, actually, it's the next question. Applicants will remain on file for a period of 1 year after submission. Applications reviewed by council will be archived and no longer eligible for consideration. So if an applicant were to apply after that recruitment window or after the window closed, their application would still be good until the next appointment cycle because it would be on file for a window. The application is only archived after a year or after you reviewed the application and said, we don't deem this individual eligible for appointment. So those interested would have to submit an application annually if they wanted to serve.
So, to be clear, Eric, you have to have 4 votes in order to be eligible, is that what?
It would be
Eric
the
was-
same, it would be the same standard that we follow for the direct appointments. You would just, the candidate pool would most likely be a little bit larger. Instead of reviewing 5 candidates, you may have 20. You're gonna select those 5 that you want to appoint right now, and then you're gonna select the additional one that you could put into an applicant pool for future appointment. And also to align this, all the terms will be set to expire on October 31st. That would get the inconsistency with the terms, get them all aligned. And the application would be limited to 1 committee. The applicants would need to submit a separate application for each committee they're interested in applying to.
So what Eric, the process Eric is describing would help plug people into those open seats during the year without it having to come back for council to be voted on
6 weeks,
over and
right?
over again.
It takes 6 weeks.
Yeah, the process takes that, and then there's also there's that delay. For instance, we did an appointment cycle in February, but around that time, we had a resignation. So now that vacancy is just gonna sit until we do another appointment cycle. Versus with this process, at our previous town council meeting, I could have brought an agenda to you to fill that vacancy immediately. And you would have already reviewed that item. You would have already reviewed the applicant once, and then you would have that secondary review when it comes on consent. If there were any issues with the appointment, you could always feel free to pull that consent item for further discussion. There were some advantages to this single appointment cycle. It extends the time that town council is allotted to review the application package from 2 weeks to 1 month. It allows for focused recruitment efforts during the summer over an extended period rather than those short, rapid recruitment cycles. It does ensure that town council still has direct appointment authority when they initially review the applicants to add to the database. And it also gives you a second chance to review the applicants when it comes before you on a consent agenda, because you can always pull that for further discussion. It reduces the time spent by staff facilitating 3 to 4 recruitment cycles, and it also allows staff to fill those vacancies within 2 weeks of termination or resignation by using that pre-selected pool. Also, with the terms aligned for a November 1 start date, this will set the stage for the committees to be able to quickly select that new leadership. They could quickly develop that work plan in November, December, and then turn it around to town council. And like I said previously, it just allows for us to do 1 annual new member orientation in November and December and just hit the ground running on those initiatives at the beginning of the year versus we have new applicants in January, then we have them in March, then we have them in a couple months later, then December. It just sets the stage for committees to complete their work.
Go ahead, you want to?
No, I have a hard time understanding the consent agenda thing, because suppose we picked 5 and the top 5, and there were other people, like say 6 to 10, they got only like 3 votes.
Well, in order to be eligible, you have to receive 4 votes of council. So
Okay, then if you get 4, are you saying like, okay, at the time when we are doing it, so it is only after the 4 votes they will be put into the pool?
no, the way that the ballot would look is that you would select, whether it's indicated by color or some type of different mark, you would select those applicants that you want appointed immediately on November 1st. But you would also be asked to select the additional applicants that you deem eligible for future appointments. So
When you say future appointments, like, do we say which ones there are future when you're just using random?
No, it would be if you've had an applicant for Public Education Advisory Committee, you didn't want to put them on the November 1st ballot, but you said they're a good applicant, they could be appointed in the future. You would go ahead and make that notation on the ballot, and then if someone were to resign or be terminated from Public Education Advisory Committee, I can go pull that application from our pool of applicants, and I could submit it to fill the vacancy.
So if there are 2 or 3 people with 4 votes, how would you do that?
And that's what I was discussing with Councilmember Robati. That's a question that we've we've tried to address, but we would have to put some more thought behind that, whether it would be the time that they submitted the application, some type of hierarchy, the number of votes that we received. That's another, a deeper question that we would have to address if council wanted to move forward with developing or at least investigating moving forward with the process.
Or you could bring it to a consent agenda item and we could discuss it and make that vote that night.
Or if council's already approved them, what if you in the rare cases where there's going to be two candidates that council has already approved for the same committee, maybe the committee could just make the call. I mean, we've already approved the person, so maybe maybe they could just look at the eligible people at a meeting and make that,
Yeah, and this is something that we would bring back to council later if you wanted to proceed with it. This was just to test the waters before we put too much effort into developing these policies, to responding to that type of question that you posed. We wanted to see if council would be interested in moving forward with it before we dig deeper into the details on how we would facilitate it.
I don't want to do it 4 times a year. That's
And I will clarify that the idea came from our neighboring municipalities. Cary does one recruitment cycle throughout the year. I have some time set up to talk to their town clerk about how they facilitate their process, but they do one cycle throughout the year, and they have a pretty large number of committees, boards and committees that they just do one throughout the year, and then they select from a pool in a similar manner to this. I'm not sure the exact process. I have to have a further discussion with her, but it's similar to this, and I said I think that this could work with Morrisville.
Okay, Eric, I think Mayor has a comment.
Yes, sir, Mayor Cawley?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Eric, great presentation. I just, I'm a little bit hesitant to have the pool of future applicants until we actually have what I would feel is a really strong number of strong applicants. I would more support if you could put together a calendar which would set up for 2 appointment cycles and maybe shorten the outreach from like 3 months to 2 months or 6 weeks, and then just appoint twice a year to get rid of the 3 to 4, which I know is a problem and hard to plan around. But I think that would be an interim step that might get us towards where we're going. So I just wanted to put that out there for council's consideration. Thank you.
Understood, and that did bring to mind, this would be a transition. It wouldn't be an instant change from this. There would have to be some type of transition because you have terms that are inconsistent now, so those terms would have to expire. They would have to be edited in order to transition into to a new cycle. So there would be some time, hopefully, to build up the applicant pool of eligible applicants. But let me cover the 2 disadvantages. An additional recruitment period could still be required if there were no applicants eligible to fill that vacancy. If there were no eligible applicants in the pool, the seat could sit unfilled for up to a year, or you would require that type of special recruitment. Also, with the single recruitment period, the appointment can only take place once per year, so that would limit that opportunity for new residents or people who said, hey, I want to engage with the town of Morrisville, but that application, that appointment cycle has already passed, so you have to wait until the next annual appointment cycle. The next step, at town council's discretion, staff could begin a more in-depth development of this annual advisory committee appointment process. This would include the development of the associated dates for initial implementation, recruitment, application review, and appointments. Also, as we discussed, the implementation of this updated policy would require various amendments to the appointed public body's administrative policy to update the term dates, the appointment process, and the appointment cycles.
All right. So you want, I thought you didn't want him to move forward with this process.
No, I don't. Because as Mayor also said, because I don't know at that time, what, you have a pool, and I don't know who will be good at that time and who is resigning, right? Like, you need a balance. So suppose take planning and zoning, for example. Like, if that experience is not there and it's by automatically you're putting him in, I would like to know the balance of,
You're not talking about planning and zoning board here. You're
It's
just
everything.
talking about
Planning
advisory
and zoning would be
committee.
out of this, but yeah, planning and zoning, it would be out of this equation. They have their own guidelines set by the UDO.
so it's very difficult to just, for me especially, do a future state without knowing who is going, who is coming. Like, diversity will play a role. several things will play a role, so.
And to add to that, those with expiring terms, they would be part of that pool. So if they have, since all the terms would be aligned, those with expiring terms would be part of that pool that you would select from. So if they have a term expiring October, they would have already submitted an application for appointment that you would review during that annual appointment cycle.
Yeah, but I get that, but, I don't want it to be like a all male or all female council by automatically, not without, intentionally, if it comes that process. So,
So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We're at a 7 PM mark, so I just want to mention that. That doesn't mean we can't keep discussing, because this is critically important if we want to change this process or not. So I'm hearing at least two people, and I'll tell you what, I'll put myself in that pot too. Maybe not ready to go this all the way with what you're suggesting, Eric. Maybe a two-step process, maybe 2 appointments a year. And I'm not sure about this pool, because things can change over time, even in a year. So maybe we figure out a way to do a 2-step appointment where we have the ability to choose versus picking a pool the first go around. Does that make sense? That's for me, but others need to weigh in.
So I support twice a year at this point. I think we might be able to move to once a year, but you have so many disparate, terms. Going to twice would stabilize this a little bit. Offer your annual onboarding in November, because that could start to be part of your first phase. Is you offer annual orientation. You'll have 2 cycles a year, and then we can evaluate, is that working? Can we go to a year? Is it good for twice a year? It'll give you some of those benefits that you're seeking, but also give us a little bit more transparency as to how that might work.
But I think that, this isn't the end process. Eric's going to bring back a process that's going to provide transparency and an explanation of how everything is going to get decided when there's a vacancy. I'm not sure what value is provided by a second cycle.
I'm doing it 2 times a year.
Well, yeah, because the thing is that it's going to take, frankly, if I read that eye chart of dates correctly, it's going to take 2 years anyway for all the terms to standardize. So before then, I guess if we did 2 review cycles until then, that's fine, but I think that once the terms are standardized, I don't see the value that you get out of the second application cycle. The only reason you would need another application cycle is if there was a mid-year vacancy.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is that the annual cycle would be for everything, and the mid-year would be the vacancies, and then we would see if it's proof of concept, would this pool work, or would we like to appoint the vacancies?
But even then, right, but even then, what I'm saying is that the reason that we need so many cycles is because there are terms beginning and ending all over the place. So so for 2 years, we might need a second, like an interim cycle in the middle, where we only look at the boards where there are vacancies, and hopefully there's not going to be that many. But I think we should move off of the four times a year cycle, immediately, like yesterday.
Yeah.
It may help that when we view this, we did view this as a multi-year process. So the first step would be getting alignment in the term. So would it be helpful if we develop something to get more consistent term dates, and that may be like a first step in the process?
Yeah, a visual with that.
See, to me, it would be helpful to develop the end state now, because, and then, fine, put something together about how we get there, what the interim looks like. But I do think we should, I don't think we should not develop the once-a-year plan at this point, because that's where we want to be. So, that gives us 2 years to work the kinks out, where, if we don't start developing it until the terms are already aligned, then we've lost 2 years of good information.
The sticky part for me is the pool. right? The pre-approved pool, that needs more discussion and refinement. And that's why I say that there needs to be two cycles. The interim cycle or the mid-year cycle would be for vacancies, but the annual cycle is everybody.
So would it, I'm hearing that the first step in either of the processes that were mentioned is aligning those term dates. So would that be,
Yes.
so is that consensus?
I
Okay.
Oh,
think
yeah.
we're.
So we
I
could
see
come back
everyone
with the
shaking their-
alignment and then we can visit the more in-depth discussion versus the two cycles versus one once we get the appointments aligned, because they'd have to be aligned either or.
It's a huge win and a great first step.
I think maybe would that be meeting in the middle?
Mhm.
In my mind, I'll probably be thinking of ways to address these issues as I'm doing it anyway. So hopefully I'll have some groundwork, some movement on that also.
And did the mayor have a comment too?
Yeah, thank you very much for the summary, Eric. It seems like we can just set up the 2-year staggered terms immediately, and just sort of, as each of the appointed people right now, just let them know what their future reappointment date would end at, and then we can do the 2 things a year right now as well, just to take the 3 and 4 off the table. Seems like that can happen concurrently. And it'll take 2 years to align the cycles and get them in place. That doesn't mean we can't be intentional about just telling everyone what they are now, because that's just an admin task. Thank you.
Did you hear all that, Eric?
I did.
Wait, but nobody's current term would be changing. There's no,
Yeah, the current terms wouldn't change, but my first step would just be able to see where the closest points of term expirations are, so we can kind of get aligned. We would have to, I'd have to work on it some, but we could bring something back to get the alignment first, since that would be the first step in any of the process, the 2-year process or annual process. The first step would be getting them aligned, so they can expire on the same day. So I can bring that back.
Thank you, Eric. You have what you need on that?
I
Is
do.
that- You got it? Okay, good.
I have a good amount of information. Okay.
And you're
so
doing fine, so don't worry.
we're gonna move forward.
That was a time check for
to the
us
next
to
one.
know.
And let's see here.
Okay, now we're moving on to advisory committee work plan review. Is everybody good moving on? Okay.
And you should have this one as a PDF also. And I'm probably going to go through this a little bit quicker, because you've seen some of these items before as they're ongoing initiatives of the committee. So I'm just going to, like I've done in the past, I'm just going to read the committee's work plan and then allow council to provide feedback. Any feedback provided will be presented to the committees at their upcoming meetings.
Yeah, and just to remind everybody, there are 7 committees, so keep that in mind when we're discussing. If you spend 10 minutes on every committee,
They're all my favorite.
they are all my favorite
We've
too.
already covered that, so I'm going to skip right to the Environment and Stormwater Committee. The Environment and Stormwater Committee did have 4 broad goals that they developed. The first being to provide access to learning or educational opportunities or events through various outreach efforts surrounding sustainability and environmental initiatives. This would include supporting stormwater outreach and creek week drain marking efforts. Continue to support the Monarch Pledge, Earth Day, Green Day, and Solarize the Triangle. The Student Art Poster Contest and Sustainability Champions concept will be vetted further this year by MESC. The second goal is to identify up to 3 correlations between MESC initiatives and as they relate to other initiatives throughout the town and report the findings annually. This is another carryover from previous work plans. Included within this goal is to attend meetings, recordings of other committees, and see how they correlate to MESC. Specifically, Parks and Recreation and Smart Cities are going to be deemed priorities. The next work plan goal is to support sustainability and the alignment with the Master Sustainability Plan. They do want to share stories of success and sustainability within the current newsletter and the Tree City Application Advisory role. The next goal is to collaborate with up to 3 peer towns, and this is another holdover that you may have seen before, to better understand best practices and improve upon our programs. One of the goals within this is to engage with peer towns advocacy groups and use it as a learning opportunity, best practice sharing, and initiative sharing. And they also did add in an incorporation of the town council meeting, but that wasn't an actual broad goal. That's something we've already discussed, so I didn't technically include that as one of the broader goals. there any feedback or comments regarding there?
Well, I have one, and it's gonna be pretty much on all of these. I do think the environmental committee has done a good job of, bulleting out here their action steps. My only comment is in the goal timelines, instead of putting ongoing, put some sort of, goal.
Like
of
a
date
cadence.
of when, it may be something that they don't know of when it's gonna happen, but at least put something in there so that the group has a goal, a date to work toward.
And while I don't have the answers for all the committees, because it's a lot of information to process, I do know for MEST, when they say ongoing, they're referring to goals that have carried on from the previous work plan years. These are ongoing initiatives over the last 2 years. So if that gives you some clarification, like the collaborate with 3 peer towns, this is something that they had in their initial work plan, and they've added that to the work plan each iteration. So I think that's what they mean by ongoing.
But even still with that, like for Tree City application, put, what date? What quarter of what year are they planning?
Yeah, when is the
Yeah, we can
submission?
get
What
them that.
they're I mean, and really, you should do that. They should be able to do that for all of these.
Even if it's not like first quarter, third quarter,
Right,
even if it's
right,
a
even if
broad
it-
timeline.
So that there's a framework of a plan of what they're working toward.
Great.
We're not gonna necessarily they're not gonna get kicked off the committee if they don't meet the dates, but
Yeah, just-
Right.
need to have something.
I agree with Councilmember Fender because one way of approaching the ongoing is you could say quarterly, reviewed quarterly in meetings, or something that shows that will help build their agenda over the course of the year. So if you know that you have a review of a success story every quarter, we know that's going to be in October and February and certain kind of
Just
things.
more specificity versus ongoing.
Yeah, and it can also
What
by
the next step is?
yeah, by doing that, you can set your priorities.
We can take that.
And then also potentially like list the steps, like I'm gonna do this part by this date.
There's no inherent accountability whatsoever in the word ongoing.
Right.
That's the thing. There's, there needs to be something to,
It's different than
To
some,
anchor.
and it's
Yeah.
different, like with planning and zoning, it's a little bit different because you have stuff coming before them and they're gonna recommend it, and then it's so tied into so much of our work, which is zoning and land use. But the other committees have always struggled because if you don't have a specific objective or goal, like Councilmember Fender said, then it's very hard for them to know what they're doing and what relevance does it have. We've got to better connect these committees with
Steve, put your mic closer, please.
we've got to better connect these committees with our strategic plan and our goals in Morrisville. When you look at the different categories of just, inclusive neighborhoods, livable neighborhoods, parks, all that stuff. So every committee's work, there should be goals that are tying to our strategic plan. Otherwise, it's like, I don't know what a lot of this work, we got away from having them commit, but I have no idea right now what the education committee's working on. I have absolutely no idea. That's not good, because many of our residents are asking about schools. When he was the idea of this education committee, he specifically had said, these are the things that he wanted, right? And since then, I haven't, maybe that's my fault.
Well, let's turn the page to
Sorry, I jumped
the
the gun.
public education
wait, before
advisory.
we get off this one, does anybody know where that meeting is going to be on October 4th, 2023? If we're invited to it, I want to try to go, but where do they meet?
Well, this was just a tentative date that they listed.
Oh, okay.
Well, okay, but so,
They haven't, council hasn't agreed to it, so this was just a tentative.
But it's good that they.
Yeah, but
I
they
was just gonna
they
say, it's
planned it.
very good that they
They
give
just
it
planned it
dates
already.
months in
Yeah, they
advance.
planned it
They're
already.
very smart.
Like, I'd like to put it on my calendar. Can we
Yeah,
do that?
I can send that information to you. So you
Okay.
Make
That'd be
sure
great.
I'm not
We
gonna
need to confirm a date. If
And
it's
if
that
council were to
date,
confirm that date,
let's confirm it sooner than later. I mean, it's in their work plan, so let's try to meet that. They picked that date for a reason. It's their meeting night, so.
Yes, their meeting nights.
Well, and if I could add here, if you remember a month or so ago, we talked about the fact that we have in our policies joint meetings, and council asked us to follow up with those committees to determine how they wanted to do that, when they wanted to do that, which we have been doing. We've asked them to discuss that at their February or March meeting. I believe this is likely MESC's response. They were one of the committees that has tried to provide a definitive date. But we're bringing back all that joint meeting opportunities to you separately once we have all of that information from all those committees.
And Martha, you're correct. That last field was added after you sent out that email for that information.
Martha, I actually had trouble hearing what you were just saying. I feel like there's an echo. Did anybody else hear that?
There's definitely.
These microphones are less than optimal than your lapel mics now, but we had a significant problem with lapel mics on Tuesdays, so we were trying something different.
We will move forward to public education. Okay, the first goal for public education was to establish an advocacy plan, review the charter for future update, consider input from joint meeting with town council, align future committee work with members' individual interests, consider partnerships to advance work of committee, develop regular program of activities to meet cross-section of needs for student grade level, focus area, and parent interest. The next broad goal was collection and dissemination of knowledge, develop a toolkit of information and resources for students and parents, create ways to effectively communicate school-related information to parents and students, and to share Wake County Public School System info and updates. The third broad goal was related to community outreach and engagement, implement a wellness fair event, and Wake County Public School System information sessions and speakers.
So which of these were done in the last 2 years? Do you know?
I believe we've seen both of these before, but the goals and action steps, I think we've seen all three of these before. I didn't look at the previous year, but the goals and action steps have changed. The goals within each overarching goal has changed, has been updated. Some of them have been carryovers, but for the most part, some of them have changed.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It would be good because right now that there's a meeting going on today as we speak for Parkside Middle, and those informations have to go to the community. So I would highly encourage this committee to send a newsletter, after you guys look into it, because it will help as part of the regular through HOA mails and those things that already you're doing. It will certainly help what is going on and what is the advocacy, because I'm not, they have to show that they're working on those things. I don't see anything coming out, especially, school assignments, okay, and then transportation. Nothing, I don't see anything on bullying, the last point, which was key, was to how do you work on those things. I didn't see a plan or anything, or working with at least the effort to work with the school counselors.
Yeah, I think, going along with what Darmela's saying is for develop toolkit of information and resources. Well, over here under goal timelines, there should be what time frame they are gonna develop that toolkit by, or list out the steps, maybe the first step is meeting with the Wake County Public School System. Okay, what's the second step? What's the third step? And put date, this is what I do at work all day. But they should, it says goal timelines. We should just delete where known if feasible and put
What's the
something.
timeline? Well, and, I'm sorry.
No,
Okay,
that's it.
Following up on that, okay. Develop a toolkit of information and resources for student and parents about magnet schools, school assignments, how to find and share school information, and transportation. So what you've just described there is the WCPSS website. So if this is going to be work for this committee, I really need to understand I don't think that it's a good idea, frankly, for parents to have more than one place where they get this assignment. And the committee is always going to be, it's never going to be able to be as fresh and immediate as that. Like, if it's going to be that when there's a change, that there's a communication process where the committee helps to get that change socialized in the community, great. But the toolkit of resources, you'd almost have to get all of that information from Wake County, and it's already there.
Well, why wouldn't, sorry.
So I feel it's important to provide some context, and currently I'm working directly with this particular committee, but some of my comments are going to relate to all the committees. Committee members are coming with their own interests, and getting them to focus on a group collaborative interest is difficult. This committee struggled to even provide this input for this work plan and come together on it. They've spent more than 6 months trying to come together on their vision of a wellness fair. So I'm not arguing with what you're asking for, but they're a committee of volunteers that get together for an hour, hour and a half, once a month, struggle with attendance, struggle with coming, and they start over and over and over. So I'm just being realistic about what the challenges are. In this particular case, the goal is to advocate to town council about what this community is interested in knowing. And that is why they're trying to pull that stuff from Wake County Public Schools to share with the community and you about the things they think this community is interested in. It's not duplicating information.
Yeah, well, I want to add to that because I think, yeah, they may get some information off the public school system website, but I saw this, the intent is being specific to Morrisville. Because you can go out to that site, and I've gone out there, and I'm like overwhelmed with the Wake County Public School System site.
Right. I mean, I guess. Okay, so, all right, if that's it, then table that for now. But another thing, Martha, is that in the situation that you're describing, this is a very ambitious agenda for this. My team would struggle with this agenda, and there's 10 of us, and we meet twice a week. So, I mean, maybe it would be better, quite honestly, to scale back the agenda. Like, if I think a fair on bullying, you know, some materials on suicide, they can accomplish that in the next 6 months. Like, I mean, that to me is a very worthy goal and a good, like a real, it fills a gap.
And a big initiative.
And
Yeah,
it's a big
this is
initiative.
good.
So I mean, like,
Mental health
know,
is a big issue.
mental health is a huge issue. And so I mean, because you're like, it seems like trying to accomplish this is, I mean, I'm just saying, like, that's a giant goal. Like, if they set up the email group and the town website updates and had the bullying fair, like, I think maybe rather than like try to boil the ocean, maybe they need to scale back.
Well, and would there be anything wrong with, for some of these other items, for the dates to be out in 2024 or 2025?
Right, just prioritize.
Yeah.
So that's actually a separate conversation we want to have with you. Right now, our admin policies say annual work plan. Staff does agree that we probably want to bring back to you, and it would align with some of these other things that Eric's talking about. With part of the challenge is the inconsistency with people coming on and off and on and off and on and off committees. So if the membership was more consistent and they wouldn't start over every time there's a new committee member, and perhaps establish a 2-year work plan, we do think both of those things will help. We will have to amend our policies. We're trying to comply with our existing policies right now.
What would be nice is like if, you know, I love your idea of giving them more specific, like, you know, it could be, it's too ambitious, 4 major things, you know, One is fair, addressing bullying, mental health. The other thing we've gotten away from is, careers, emerging careers. Everyone's talking about, but, what are the skills now in this, innovation economy? He talked about that initially. We've gotten away from that. Working with Wake Tech, RTP, what's going on? Where are the opportunities for careers for our children?
And more.
So, I'm sorry. So I may offer something that'll help streamline this process for you. If you want to consider going back and talking with more annual work plans or allowing some of the things to go, then just allow the committees to do the work that they've proposed for you right now and include the enhancements to the work plan process as a part of that overall process. They're doing the best they can, is all I'm saying.
Agreed, but shouldn't there be a process where they come in and present to us on this is what we've done this year?
That, they are supposed to have done those work plan reviews. If they don't come to meetings, we can't get the stuff from them.
I mean, I want this committee, but to be very honest with you, if I'm not getting reports about what's being done, why are we even having the committee? I mean, because.
But you could say that for almost every committee we have.
But not some of them. Some of the committees are getting the work done. We've seen some of that. I mean, I'm not.
But you're not getting the reports is what I heard you say.
Okay. So I'm just trying to be helpful to them, is if we give them, like Ann was saying, just 4 things, and they would just come and say, this is what we've done
Yeah.
this year.
This committee in particular has had incredible challenges in aligning their personal interests for why they joined this committee with what the charter has outlined.
I don't understand why it wouldn't be helpful to give them some suggestions on things that we think it would be valuable for them.
Well, that's what the purpose of this is for, but they're bringing forth what their ideas were. I mean, they may be very happy to hear scaled back, but again, 6 months on just a wellness fair that now we're trying to get done next month.
So I like the idea of let me throw my 2 cents in there. I like the idea of scaling back. I love the idea of a wellness fair, whether it happens in May or sometime. And back to this other, let's not duplicate efforts either. We don't need to duplicate everything that Wake County Public School System is doing. Do we need to help our residents understand how to get the information they need? For Morrisville residents, 100%. I mean, maybe there's even a Wake County Public School 101 class that's held here in Morrisville for one night, where these subject matter experts come in and actually speak to the public versus just to a committee. Maybe that's the next event that they work toward. And honestly, those are 2 big events. I think they're done. I'm done.
Yeah, and my idea was not to reinvent the wheel like what is already done by Wake County, but at least tell important dates. And that's more important was how can they be an information, especially for getting volunteer hours and internships. And they have entire RTP here. We could use them. And how can this committee go in and get those informations and work? Because how is it useful for a parent with this committee? That's what I look at.
And high schoolers want internships and other opportunities,
Yes.
experience. Their hours for honor society is important.
Yeah, they
Right.
pretty much like there's so much, other the entire RTP like our Morrisville has that they are looking for, and how can we channel as a catalyst? That was the whole intent to,
So all of this that you've heard, Martha, can you can you tell them can you ask them that's kind of the focus that we would hope they would focus on? These
Yes,
are the
we can do
areas
that.
we would hope they would focus on and move forward on those initiatives. And honestly, we just said 3 now that I think are 3 really big ones. And
And to
and
clarify.
I could see value to our residents in the 3 things we just talked about. I can see real value, and that's what we want. I mean, that's what we
the whole
created
idea.
the committee was to bring value to our residents. And I remember as a new parent here, and it has only gotten worse in these years. this Wake County Public School system is difficult to maneuver unless you have somebody helping you maneuver through it. So just think of all the new people that move here all the time, and the first thing you hear is, oh my gosh, where did my kid go to school? How do I figure this out? And there are like a bazillion options, so we need to help them.
Elementary schools in the.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Councilmember Scarlett Johnson.
So I like the idea of simplification for the education committee. They've never really flourished. They've kind of done a lot of circular, discussions, not knowing exactly what their central purpose is, but a lot of individual purposes were voiced. So I love the idea of them sponsoring speakers and other opportunities to help our parents. But most importantly, we're behind time, and I've heard multiple council members state that the goal and timeline section of all of these plans, it would be more helpful to give a little bit more timeline or recurrence, quarter to monthly, instead of just an ongoing kind of thing, to anchor the committee also to be prepared for those meetings. If I know that you're going to regularly provide feedback at a monthly meeting, you might want to think about, what the agenda's doing and know that that's a responsibility or kind of thing. So it's just that cadence for the meetings too. And regarding reports, I don't think reports are necessary. I think meeting minutes would be sufficient to, provide the insights as to what's going on, because creating a report for the purpose of creating a report might not add the value that we expect.
Well, what about if, once a year, the committee comes in the town council meeting and gives us a short PowerPoint presentation?
I think five.
This is what
We say you get 5
completed.
slides.
Well,
Yeah.
5 slides.
In 10 minutes.
What we want to do, this is what we've done.
Yeah.
At the
this
end
is-
of the
we
year,
had
we
that.
do
We
facilitate
had-
a work plan review where I bring back the initiatives that were completed versus the ones they plan to.
But it's fun for them
better
to
getting it from the
share,
committee.
and we get to thank
Yeah,
them.
I would like to see them in person give the presentation rather than just.
Yeah, just come in and see them.
And
We used to get minutes before of every committee. Now we don't, like, other than it's been posted on the website. Like, we used to get every approved minutes of every committee before. Now we
Email
don't.
to you?
Yeah, they used to get, like, Stephanie and others, like, then we used to get emails all the time. At one
They are
minutes-
out- they
minutes-
are out on the
Council
website.
talked about how to coordinate meeting with the meeting and coming to the council to present at that meeting was an option provided to them. I don't think any of them have selected that.
So therefore, we need to go to their meetings. Like MESC asked us to come hopefully in October.
And I
So-
have-
Smart City Steering Committee did a good job of
Yep.
putting some dates. in
Yeah,
there.
let's move on, because
Q3.
no judgment,
No.
but we've only gone through 2 of 7, and now it's 7:30,
I-
so no judgment.
And I'll add the comments that were received that can apply to all the committees. I'll make
Yeah.
sure that they receive.
I got one question and I'll shut up. Like,
For Smart City, they have the overarching.
Oh,
goal.
hang on one second, Eric. Councilmember Garamella has a comment.
Who sets the agenda for the meeting? I want to know that.
For the
Any
committee-
committees?
Any.
Who sets
Well,
the agenda?
with the
for-
exception of the Smart City Steering Committee, the committee members drive the agenda, unless there's an item coming forward. For instance, this work plan review, when I'm gonna present this to them, that's something that a staff member would move forward on the agenda. But typically, the committee members themselves drive the agendas for the meeting.
Are we in track with the charter is the question. I want to make sure, because if they go off the rail guards, it should not be a spiral. So like, for example, say, Mork is like doing something over and beyond what it's not supposed to do. Or Smart City is like going into
Well,
other stuff. So who is from a staff, because we don't see the agenda.
The support staff liaison does look at the agenda, so I haven't seen anything left field that was placed on the agenda itself. But the support staff do monitor the agenda. They're the ones that physically place the item on the agenda, so they do monitor for that alignment. They help guide it, but the committee members themselves typically drive the discussion topics based upon the work plan.
The staff person puts the agenda together, so they're,
But the staff member,
Staff doesn't put-
The staff
The staff
member
member
works
puts
with,
it up.
typically works with the chair of the committee, and again, it follows the work that they're doing. I'm again gonna mention, when you ask them what they're joining the committee for, it's not, at least with the MPAC committee, it is not aligned with the charter. So we've had those conversations.
Exactly.
all right, are we ready for Smart City? Yeah.
Smart City, the overall work plan goals, the first was to drive public education and engagement. The Morrisville Smart Video, which was completed, they want to do some type of Wi-Fi signage, detailed videos of specific areas, some like the Smart Shuttle, participation in various community events, the distribution of newsletters, flyers, sporting events, and also engagement education via the use of light pole banners, various QR codes throughout town signage, and presentations in other areas and possible signage at RDU. The second goal is support Smart City staff traffic corridor, identify the transportation technology or use cases to pilot along the corridor locations, address any type of problems that could need solving, such as the train crossing times, pedestrian awareness, and they also want to benchmark other cities. The third goal is review Smart City initiatives, the beta testing for the new mobile application by the members, and review of the Smart City initiatives and provide input as requested by staff. And as you did state previously, they did put a little bit more specificity in their goal timelines.
I think we like that.
And this one is helpful. Smart City is kind of the exception because their work is driven heavily by the support staff who set these dates.
I know I'm being picky, but for the second goal and just the first one there, 2023, I mean, could they add third quarter or fourth quarter or whatever they're thinking? Like they did the others.
More questions on Smart City or any more feedback?
Nope, keep moving.
I mean, yeah, they're doing stuff and they're telling us when, move
Yeah.
on.
Performance.
Eric, I would tell you, don't worry about reading through everything.
Understood.
Yeah.
Let's
Performance
kind of
measures.
glance at it and make sure we're good.
Will do. You want me to read the overarching goals?
No.
Nope.
We're fine.
We're good.
Sounds good. Saves my voice. If you have any feedback, just
And
let
they
me
have
know. No
some,
feedback?
they have some really good goal timelines in there, so
good
that's.
stuff.
So the only thing is, I mean, one of their main goals is the broader review of the committee charter and the expected role of the committee. Like that seems.
Where are you looking at? I'm
Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry,
can we
I'm
all
on
get there?
performance measures. Where are we?
Yeah, which one? Sorry.
The first one,
Got
the
it.
broader
Sorry.
review of the committee charter. That seems like that seems like something that doesn't need to be a year-long goal, does it? I mean, I understand that it's a goal of theirs, but to include that as one of the things that they're gonna do this year, like, I would like to see that facilitated sooner rather than later.
Well, they do
And-
have charter review at mid-year, third quarter.
So, again,
Q3 is
with
July.
PMAC, they had maybe 2 years of not having enough people to really
Okay.
do their work. So the people that were part of that committee have tried to reinvigorate some of the work they do, and when council reviewed the charters last year, they wanted an opportunity to try to settle in with this new work before they would bring back recommendations on their charter for you to consider changing. And you've just seated that full committee for really the first time in a couple years.
They did have a large number of vacancies.
All right.
All right, you good with that? We move on to public safety?
Public safety had 2 overarching goals. Any feedback, comments related to these?
I liked this level of involvement. I thought these were very good goals, knowing the frequency is not, they don't meet monthly, they meet every other month, so this is perfect.
Is this, each member would attend 4 of the 6 town events, or the committee would be present
They-
at 4 of the 6
No,
town
they
events?
do have individual members outlined that they want to attend. each
Okay.
day. They're going to kind of split it up to take care of it.
I'd be interested to know what they plan on presenting or doing? Are they gonna have a booth at these activities? And
They previously had a booth. I could get some more feedback from the committee, but typically they've had a booth at some of our events. At Springfest, they had a booth.
so what do they give information on
Yeah, they have informational
Like
flyers that they hand out.
child seat
Mhm.
fittings?
It includes Public Works too, this committee. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, they hand out a lot of information. They talk about themselves, obviously, but that they share all the opportunities here in the town for our
Recycling,
residents
they would
related to
also
public
do.
safety. Yeah.
Okay.
They do a great job. Actually, a lot of our committees do a great job showing up at our events and manning booths and
Yeah.
sharing information about activities and ongoing. They all do a fabulous job. They do this all on their own time. They volunteer all their time.
Yeah.
They do a wonderful job.
So if they're presenting information on recycling, do they work with the Environment Stormwater Committee?
I hope so. I don't think they have a hard line to them though.
They don't, but Environment Stormwater is engaging with all the committees just to see those areas of cross collaboration where they can assist in efforts like that.
Man, those people are on fire.
And they have tried to look for creative methods to engage with committees that may not directly align with Environment and Stormwater to find those unique areas of crossover collaboration.
Well, in this section down here, can we have them coordinate with the MES committee?
We could probably put that on almost everyone,
Well,
except
I
for
mean, they
even
have coordinate,
education.
but especially if they're doing recycling.
That's because Public Works coordinates that.
I wouldn't mind seeing a column in this chart, actually, for for collaboration. Like what other committees would be involved in this work that this committee's planning to do? Like who are they planning to collaborate with?
My only concern with that, I'm not sure if they would have especially for PSAC, as they meet every other month, there may be some difficulty in that cross collaboration. We can find ways for them to.
I get that, but I still think that, I mean, I don't think that they should do it. I don't think they should do it without collaborating with, I mean, if they have to, like, then either, start earlier or call a special meeting or cross-invite to each other's meetings, but I don't think the meeting schedule should be the barrier between collaboration where there needs to be collaboration.
And it's just simply awareness in most cases. It's not like we have to
Yeah.
do something together.
Okay, so you're mostly looking for just that engagement, so they're aware of each other's initiatives or
Yeah.
actual. Okay, I got you. Okay,
Like, hey, we're going to attend Earth Day with
that
you.
makes sense. We can work.
So just to add to this conversation, Eric holds that training session. It's coming up this Friday where he talks about every committee and kind of what they do and who they are, and those that are here hear that information and there's a lot of that
It's tomorrow. evening.
collaboration that
tomorrow.
comes out of those meetings. Did I say, what did I say? Tomorrow night? Yeah,
Friday?
Friday, tomorrow.
Yeah.
This week has gone fast.
6 to 7 here.
Okay, are we good with public safety? Can we move on? All righty.
We got a time box. This is 1 2
Yeah,
hours.
well, I think we got 1 minute.
Okay, for Parks Recreation
See if that
Advisory, any comments, feedback you want to provide to the committee?
Just add timeline.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make sure we add that to all of them, more specificity regarding the timeline of dates.
I'd
If
also
they could
like
at
to
least
see
list
this
it for-
committee take charge of identifying spots for little libraries around town. I think that fits right in with,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Ann. Say again?
I'm sorry, I said that I would like to see this committee maybe bring back some recommendations for places around town where we could put little libraries, that kind of stuff. I think that, I know that there are already some located in some of the parks, and to have them look around for other locations would, I think, be a good use of their time.
Thank you. All right, we're good with that. We'll move on to Senior Advisory Committee.
Final, last but not least, the Senior Advisory Committee. Any feedback you would like them to receive?
There's no timelines.
I would just like to
Yeah,
know the frequency of some of those activities.
They have a lot of good activities going on.
I mean, they're very busy.
They
So they're
are very busy.
They're underselling themselves.
I mean, seriously, you're not kidding.
One area where one committee that we just have to meet, which it's a really easy idea, ideas, you're connecting with other senior groups.
Right.
So for
Yeah,
example,
they-
we cite North Carolina and some of these other groups, and other senior groups of other organizations, coordinating with them so that those organizations know what our committees are doing. So
Within the town of Morrisville, you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah, so like, for example, the trips to the museum, the trips to the this thing, the St. Patrick's Day, the lunches, so other people can come and then know that our town is working to work with seniors.
So I had the opportunity to sit in on one of their meetings. I think it was their their January meeting, and they talked exactly about that, how to share information across town with other groups and how to get the word out. So they are, that's on their radar, but I agree with you. They're aware of that.
And that is it. The feedback that you all provided is gonna be compiled, and we'll present that to the committees for their review and possible implementation into their work plan. Oh, and then the final step I almost forgot about because we discussed it. Staff does recommend extending the work plan development and review cycle to 2 years. We found that the annual review cycle has just created a rush process to try and develop and implement a work plan. A 2-year work plan cycle would allow each committee to have the time that they need to develop the actual work plan itself and to work towards completion of each of their goals. So that is one of our recommendations that would require a change to our policy.
Would it be staggered so that we could review like half the committees 1 year and half the committees the other year?
So then we're pushing some people out 3 years if you do that. Well, no, maybe not.
I was just for us to review them more, and also for them to present. You had half the committees present 1 year and half the next year.
See,
That
I
way.
would still like to review yearly, even if they develop a 2-year plan, I'd still like to review yearly, because then at any given, after this year, at any given time, you're looking at like things highlighted in yellow that we reviewed last year that are already done, and then things that are upcoming, and then the things that are highlighted in yellow fall off, and these things get done. And I still think there needs to be a yearly review process of the work plans, because the work plans are going to evolve every year anyway, but it's just going to be 2 years out.
We could still have the annual review, just extending the work plan timeline to a 2-year period versus the 1.
The difference is they would develop the work plan every 2 years.
We could still leave the annual review in there while they develop it to last for a 2-year cycle instead of, technically it's a 1 year, but it's even shorter than 1 year.
So this process that we're going through right now, I'm going to give you my opinion. I think we should do this every 2 years. And then the interim year, we get like a update.
A report.
A report that,
Go for that.
like we have reports on our agenda now that are report only, for information. Would that help? Because
That
that
would
would help me.
Yeah, that'd help.
And the annual
I'm not sure
review-
we can go through this process every year. I think every other year is probably a good thing with an update in between. Alrighty. Okay, do we need a break before we go into budget? Okay,
Yes.
can we do like a,
10?
can we be back at
I can do it.
7:55? Can we do like a 6-minute?
Maybe.
Let's shoot for 7:55, because this next topic is gonna be long too.
9 o'clock is what I've been told.
I'm trying.
This session isn't a decision session, this is really an info session. We want to remind you that you're at the 1,000-foot level. I'm just trying to build awareness and understanding, give you opportunity to talk about things and feed input, information into the process. Before it gets, I think you've said, baked. So that's why we're here tonight. We're going to start off really working with Ted Poole. He's with Davenport and Associates. We've worked a long time together with the town of Morrisville, and he's going to help us really get a bird's eye view of some of the things we might need to consider as we try to fit in 10 top priority projects and some of the things we need to be looking out for. So it's really, again, looking through and slicing it and getting different perspectives on how we can approach it, but it isn't decision points. It's just information at this point. How you react to it and the input you can give us helps us as we plan for CIP and the budget process. Here, beat.
Yeah, there's like a little buzz.
So throughout this process, I think the best strategy, Michael and I talked earlier, is that as Ted and Michael go through both of the presentations, the debt capacity and affordability and the CIP, because they build on each other, is think about if there's a term you need to get clarified. If there's, I need to make sure I understand what you're saying, then let's interrupt at that point and you can ask clarifying questions just so that you understand the information that's being provided you at that moment. Let's wait and hold on discussions, really core questions, meaty things, till the end of both of these sessions. Is that fair?
Okay, you want to go through both presentations and then we'll have robust discussion.
Right. If you need to clarify a term, if he's gonna throw some terms out at you.
I'm trying to define them as I go.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Defining terms.
The 35 minutes, does that include our questions? Because you can add another 30 minutes on top of that.
So remember, this isn't decisions, this is just hearing information. What are the challenges or the opportunities that we're recognizing as we slice through some scenarios? And it allows us to get different perspectives at different angles that fill or feed your input to us so that we can pull together a recommended CIP and how it impacts the budget. But the debt affordability layers on and drives how your CIP might look as we fold in debt and pay-as-you-go. Okay? I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Can I just make a quick comment? There's a low humming, buzzing noise. Do we know where it's coming from by any chance? Okay, thank you. That's fine. That's all we need to hear, that you're working on it. We will
It's gonna drive you nuts.
we will plow through. I will try to ignore it. Okay. Go ahead. Yes.
All right, well, good evening, Council. Good to be back with you to continue discussion of your CIP. As you all recall, earlier this month, we had a really good discussion at your work session on March 2nd to talk about your capital project priorities. At the end of that work session, you all agreed to a top 10 project priority list. Since that time, staff has really been working to put together and begin developing a CIP that addresses those priorities that you have identified. Part of that, of course, has been working with Ted and his team to update the debt model. And then we've also been working on addressing some of the cost overages that we've shared information with you about at the retreat and then in some recent meetings as well. So just some of the things that we've been considering. I will, of course, in a few minutes, turn it over to Ted to go through all the work that we've had them do for us. And then following Ted's presentation, then I will share a bigger picture, full CIP, kind of preliminary outlook for you all. And that's where, as Jeannie was just saying, we can kind of have discussion following that. And so, at that point, I'll kind of pause there. So just as a quick reminder for you all, these are the top 10 projects that you had identified as your highest priorities. So I'll give you just a minute to kind of refresh your memory on that. They all, you're well aware of all the projects, and as you remember, the X's really just signify where you've indicated those are priorities across all the different exercises that you did at the retreat and then the month following the retreat. So before we get into the update that we've worked with Ted and his team on for the debt model, I did think it was helpful to just briefly review kind of probably what was the last real iteration of the debt model that you all had seen. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but stop me if you need to. So just looking at the 2021 debt model, starting there kind of on the left side, total planned debt at that time was $56 million. 37 of that $56 million was directly for the 2021 bond referendum. And then there was an additional $19 million that was installment financing, mostly for the public works facility. And there's an additional 3 for other public facilities as well. And kind of looking at the projects, you'll recall last year there was a swap between the Crescent Tree Creek Nature Park and Town Center to Town Green, kind of accommodate the timing for those projects. And then looking at the planned issuance timeline, of course, last spring we did actually issue the $16.5 million that you see there, so that is now issued. But then that left another $20.5 million of unauthorized GO bond debt. And you can see the breakout of that towards the bottom there. And then, of course, we had the Public Works facility in '26 with some additional installment financing as well. So just with what we have issued, the 16.5, that's what we've issued in the authorized GO debt. That leaves $20.5 million remaining in the authorized but unissued debt. So, and 13 of that is Parks and Recreation, and another $7.5 million in the transportation bucket. So just as we started to work on your priorities and updating the CIP, these are the decision factors that we really considered and had to make updates based on. So, of course, first of all, your priorities, the timing interest that you all shared, and then also timing associated with coordination with external entities like the school system or DOT factored in as well. Of course, debt capacity and affordability, which is really what Ted will be hitting on. And then balancing that with our cash reserves, and then addressing also the cost overages that we've mentioned. And then kind of getting into some of those specific examples, of course, Church Street Park, which I know you heard a detailed presentation on earlier this week. That significantly impacted the outlook for the CIP. Airport Boulevard Extension Phase 1, which I think we had previously shared at the retreat, but we do anticipate having to provide some additional town funds for that as well. So that's something that we've had to factor into the CIP, and you'll see as we move through the presentation. And then we have a lot of other projects that we don't have final costs for yet either. So the dog park, of course, is a larger project in motion, and then the Crabtree Creek Nature Park as well. Still don't have the final costs for that. But we did, of course, share at the retreat that we anticipate that would be over our previous estimates when we were doing the CIP last year. And then updates to future projects as well. So Town Center, factoring in the updates I think you recently heard on the Town Center project, including the corresponding cost estimates for that. The Public Works facility, when we were looking at that just a moment ago, you saw $16 million. That was the last number before this update this year that we had modeled with Davenport. That's now north of $20 million, so we have adjusted for the updated cost for the Public Works facility. Addition of Fire Station 2 relocation and construction as we worked with Ted on debt modeling, so you'll see that. That was one of your top 10 priorities. And of course, just other project obligations and things that are coming. So those are kind of all the major factors. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ted to kind of speak to his pieces of this. And I'll just remind you, as you look through some of his materials, he's really focusing on all the CIP projects that involve some kind of debt, whether it's general obligation bond debt or installment financing. Later at the end, I will cover fuller CIP that includes some other projects that will be cash funded. So, Ted.
All right, great. Well, good evening. I did pass around a book of ours that has a lot of information in it, but we're going to focus on this stapled piece. It's got excerpts from our book, and I think you'll be able to look at this one on your own and sort of piece together what's in between. A couple of things I wanted to cover on the front end. The town is rated AAA by all three national rating agencies, and that's a pretty rare level to be at. And there's nothing in here that we're proposing on the capital side that should jeopardize that. We don't have any concerns about the debt that we're going to be talking about that would jeopardize that rating. We're just talking about tax-supported debt. Today on the books, you've got about $41 million of debt outstanding. Just a little perspective. And it's stepping down over time, right? The payments are going down, and that's creating some capacity for you all. You've got a number of debt policies. You're in compliance with all of them. I'll cover that. And you have debt capacity, and we talk about debt capacity. Within those policies, within those ratios, there is room for the town to take on more debt. Not unlimited, but there is room for the town to take on more debt. So there's capacity. The follow-on question is affordability. How do you pay for it, right? And so they're not They're related but different. And so we're going to talk about both capacity, of which there is ample capacity, and then affordability. And a couple of things about how you budget for debt. You essentially, in the current budget, are appropriating about $5.5 million a year for debt service. And it's coming from two basic streams of revenue, a general fund appropriation of about $3.5 million and a dedicated 3 pennies on the tax rate, which is about $2 million. Those two sources of funding together, $5.5 million. Your debt service in the budget you're working on now is about $4.2 million. So there are more dollars in the budget than the debt service that's currently on the books. And that's giving us a start for the new debt that we're going to talk about to help you afford it. So you're in a really good position in that all of your existing debt is paid for in a sustainable fashion. You can continue to budget at those levels, and you've got some built-in capacity or affordability for what we're about to talk about on new debt.
Ted, that was our strategy when we started working on the bond referendum. That was our strategy to be able to build those reserves and pay for it with just the 3 cents.
That's right.
At that time.
At that time.
Projects that were in that.
And just for reference, we will talk about 1 penny on the tax rate. That's generating about $650,000 for you. So benchmark.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Previous, you were talking about our, current, debt, can't think of the word. It's $5.5 million a year, and then you said something was 4.2
Sure.
million? What was that?
So what you're budgeting for debt service in your budget is 5.5, but the actual payments on the debt you're making next year are 4.2.
Okay.
So there's more money in the model right now than what you owe next year, which is going to help us afford some of the new projects.
So 5.2 monthly or yearly?
Yearly.
Yearly, everything on a fiscal year basis. Okay, so I thought that might be helpful. And there are some slides in our full book that will cover those topics I just mentioned. I want to start here on page 9. These are your 3 debt policies. And from left to right, I'll sort of explain what's going on here. The left-hand one is called a 10-year payout ratio. What we're measuring there is how much of your debt are you retiring in the next 10 years. It's a forward look. And it's measured in percentage. Higher is better. It means you're paying debt back more quickly. And right now, your payout ratio is 60%. You can see that on the graph on the left-hand side. That green bar is at 60%, and it's getting stronger. You have a policy that says we don't want it to drop below 55%. So although you're close, you're not below it. So higher is better here. You're in compliance. The middle one is debt to assessed value. So here what we're measuring is that roughly $40 million that's outstanding today of debt as a percent of your tax base, which is about $6.5 billion. And the math is when we divide the debt outstanding by the tax base, your debt to assessed value is 0.63%. So, a little more than 0.5%. You can see that in the middle chart, the green bars. You have a policy that says we don't want to go above 2%. So lower is better. You're well below. And this is a really good example of a ratio and a policy where you have room, you have capacity. You could take on some additional debt and still show compliance with your policy. And I will also tell you what's in the bigger book is you would show compliance or show that you are in you have a reasonable debt profile for the ratings you carry. And then thirdly, on your policies, debt service to expenditures. So essentially, how much of your budget each year goes to debt service? And remember, the debt service is about $4.2 million or so. When we go through the math, your debt service to expenditures is about a little over 10%. You have a policy that says we don't want to go above 15%, so lower is better. Here again, you have some capacity. This one's a little tighter. And you'll see that when we get into the new projects that we're talking about. This one, is one that gets closer, if not a tad above your policy in our projections. But regardless of that, at this point, you're in compliance and then some.
But if we take on new debt, wouldn't that affect the payout ratio? I mean, we're really close to the payout
That's
ratio.
close, and when, the way that we're gonna take out the debt and the way that the local government commission in Raleigh will want the debt structured is we're gonna stay above it. It's
Okay.
close, but we are gonna stay above it.
Okay.
Okay? All right. A lot going on this slide 10, and I'm sorry about the small print, but if we kind of start on the left-hand side, the lines have numbers, and the first 12 lines list all the projects that have been identified as priorities, okay? And they're not in any particular order here, but they're all on here, and I believe that's been informed by the prioritization process that you all have gone through. So you've got the projects. You go to the right under column B, it just is telling us what category is it in, Parks and Rec versus Transportation versus Facility. Very simple. Column C is where is the funding coming from? Is it a general obligation bond that was voted?
And let's get them to page 11 because it's a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Here. Does that help?
Oh, this is good, this one.
Okay. Page 11 is the one.
I can blow this up bigger.
It's a
He
tad
forgot his
bigger.
glasses.
Tad bigger.
No, he forgot his
Oh,
glasses.
I don't have that.
All right, you can.
Okay, you need glasses.
Yeah,
There-
you know,
The print is little
you're
mumbled
not
in
so
this.
young
You
anymore.
see it right up there, right? It's bigger up there.
Letters, the closer
I
to
can
50.
barely read.
You go.
You're in your
You want my
40s
glasses?
now.
Call
He's
the
in
eye
his
doctor.
late 40s. Don't be getting his early
Do you need
40s.
glasses? Sounds like it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you start again, Ted? Do me a favor, start again.
Okay.
We have forgotten everything you just said.
All right, we're on the slide that says summary of capital funding plan, right?
Yes.
And look at the left-hand side, the top 12 lines represent the projects that we're modeling, that are derived from your prioritization process. Column B is the category, so it's Parks and Rec versus Transportation versus Facilities. Column C is where's the funding coming from? So you have a general obligation bond that would have been voted. You have an IFC, that's an installment financing contract. That's another type of debt that is not voted, but it is rather secured by an asset, like a mortgage on a facility. And then we have some other sources that have been identified that are footnoted there that are being used to fund some certain couple of projects. Column D is what projects and what amounts are being funded with debt. And so over all of these projects, as you look at column D, we're issuing in our model about $57.5 million of debt. Okay? There are also elements of these that are cash funded, $8.6 million. So the grand total of the estimated cost of the projects we're looking at is $66.1 million.
Does cash funded mean that it comes out of the general fund, or what does that mean?
These are coming out of dollars that have been accumulated or set aside, separate and apart from the general fund balance, maybe ARPA-related funds.
Could be also parks
Parks payment in lieu, okay.
streets payment in
All right,
lieu,
got it.
the reserves that you all commit to.
Okay? So under F, the grand total of the projects that are being assessed is 66.1. The cash is in hand, so what we're gonna be modeling and measuring the affordability of is the debt. As you look on the far right, we've run 3 cases. And what you're seeing here is what fiscal year each of these projects is expected to be funded in. That's when the debt would be issued. So they're all similar across the 3 cases, with the exception of line 7, which is the Public Works Facility. We've looked at that under 3 different time frames, funded in 25 versus 26 versus 29. And then we ran in our 3rd case a sensitivity analysis that looked at pushing Fire Station 2 out until such time as the whole program could be done without needing additional resources or revenues or a tax impact. And it would require that that project be pushed out to 2035 in order to do the whole program within the dollars you currently budget. Okay? As you go back over to the left, you go about halfway down on the line 15, you'll see, and Michael talked about this, under authorized. Those were the bond authorizations done in 2021. $8 million for facilities, 17.3 and 11.7. That is $37 million worth of GO bonds that were voted. You go to the right of that under issued, that was done last year, or 2022, 16 and a half. And you go to remaining, that's 20.5 million of GOs that are left. And those are getting issued through the course of this CIP, plus those installment debts that we talked about, which again are not voted, but they're, you go through the normal authorization process as a council, public hearing, and they're ultimately secured by a mortgage on the facility. And in this case, it's your two major facilities here. It's the Public Works and the fire station that would be funded through that type of debt. Okay? So we have identified, as you go to the right of, that middle section, $57.5 million of debt to fund the $57.5 million of required debt funding. Go a little bit lower under column F, and we've got $10.3 million of other resources, cash from cash reserves that have been accumulated, ARPA funding, and on line 26, we also have something known as a 2/3 bond. That is essentially a North Carolina convention where in the prior year, if you paid down a certain amount of GO bonds, you can issue without a referendum 2/3 of that amount. And so if you're in the debt issuing process every year, it's difficult to take advantage of that. But every other year, you can take advantage of it. And for you all in 2024, you could choose, if you needed it or wanted it, to issue about 1.7 million of 2/3. But the way all of this is shaping up right now is you've got $66.1 million of projects, and between debt and cash, we've got, $67.8 million of resources. So you're a little overfunded on paper. You may not need to take advantage of those 2/3 bonds, or you might decide you need to as project costs get refined. Okay?
Quick question, sorry. The cash reserves on line 24, that's general fund?
No, that's separate and distinct from the general fund. Those are dollars that have been accumulated.
I could just, hopefully this helps, but that could be like combination of, parkland payment in lieu,
Oh, that
streets
could,
payment in lieu,
got it. Never mind, that question
capital
was asked.
reserves that you contribute.
Thank you. Got it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Is there any, between the 2/3 financing and the other types of debt, is there an advantage to, is there like a disadvantage to the 2/3 GO bonds or anything like that?
No, the market would look at those the same. They would have the same rating. And you would, if you took advantage of the 2/3, you would do it in conjunction with one of these other GO issuances.
Okay.
The installment debt maybe has a slightly higher interest rate than the GO. A GO is, backed by your full faith and credit. It's backed by your taxing authority. It's the best credit you all can offer. An installment is subject to annual appropriation. So as you're doing your budget, you appropriate the dollars to make that debt payment. And so it's not quite as strong as the GO, but for a AAA rated town, for two very essential facilities, we would think the difference in the interest rate would be pretty nominal. Okay?
I have a question. On this 4.6 million in ARPA funds, that's been put in the equation, but do we know if we can use the 4.6 for any of these capital projects?
I can answer that question, Ted.
Yep.
So the 4.6 million is the second tranche of ARPA funds that we have. Yes, it could be used to fund capital projects. I will say that in the plan that I'll get to a little bit later, we're not really utilizing that for capital projects based on just the other funding sources that
So you're saying we don't need that 4.6
We've not, and what we're
million?
sharing tonight, we're not utilizing a significant portion of the $4.6 million for the CIP outlook
Okay,
that you'll see tonight for the projects you'll see that I'll share later.
all right.
So, my last slide here, I guess, page 11, or on the bigger book, page 12. So this is our summary of cases, and let's just kind of work down case one first. The difference in this case is that the Public Works facility is funded in FY '25. So you can go down column C, and you can see in that first 14 or so lines what amount of debt is being issued in what years, and it all sums up to the 57.5 million. You can go through lines 16 through 22, and you will see that the result of this debt on your policies. And so you can see the policy, we're a little bit ahead of the 10-year payout. We're still well below our debt to assessed value ratio or policy. Our debt service to expenditures, which is by policy not to exceed 15, we're at about 16.5% for a period of about 5 years. So we're on a planning basis out of compliance with that policy for 5 years. I would say that it's just something to keep our eye on as we go. We've been conservative in our interest rate assumption. If you have a little more budget growth, the math will work out in such a way that it may not be an issue. And regardless, it would be well within your rights and the way the policy is written to say, look, we understand that, and we're willing to make an exception because these are important projects.
Will that increase in our tax base?
You're referring to the growth, the development on the McCrimmon corridor. So we're actually experiencing that growth right now. So our average tax base growth is around 3%. We're actually projecting it almost close to 5.5% right now. So that's what we were experiencing for this fiscal year. We will be analyzing how can I bump that up and still be conservative for 2024. Not sure it's going to materialize at the same rate that it already has this year, but it is something we are looking at in our models for the budget as well as we look at CIP.
The bottom line, usually we use 3% as a yearly growth, and you're saying
Usually we do, and it's one of the reasons that we asked Ted in his conservative models to actually take it up to 3.5%. Again, you want the modeling to be very conservative so that you project a worst case scenario. Again, he just said we likely will experience as we move through 23 and 24 perhaps better outcomes as a result that could improve the future picture since we're looking so long range. But understanding what the McCrimmon corridor is going to do for us, not just this year, but into the future is very important, as well as the town center. And then much further down as we look at the long range picture, the TOD for tax-based growth.
Just for historical, we have had scenarios like that before where
Right.
we thought, ooh, we need to keep our eye, and we have always been okay.
Yeah, I remember
Not,
3 years.
not to say that's always going to happen, but
But okay, that is fine, like 5.2. So basically, we're talking about 2.5, around $1.5 million more, like in tax, based on your.
That's pretty good.
From the projection.
That's pretty good for this year. Now you reset the bar. You have revaluation also that is not actually a part of this model for reasons that you control when that occurs, what that tax rate gets set at. And you could actually put it below revenue neutral. So we don't want the model to be to include that just yet. That's a strategy you can leverage in the future in 2025 that might help you not just with capital, but even with your operating budget. So keep that in mind as well.
Okay, the reason I was asking was when I see this out of compliance, is it fair to assume with the growth and the, like, tax change, like, which will be coming, this will work it out itself, or is it still going to be an issue?
So I'm going to let Ted sort of refer you back when we did the bond referendum. We were actually projecting 19% above the debt service ratio. And I think that was for a period of 3 years. So we were comfortable at that point and confident that we would likely have an improving situation because the model was as conservative as it was. Now, that's not a guarantee. So I do want to say that too, but I'll pass this back to Ted, that we were at over 19% for a couple of years when we were doing the original debt that built the 2021 bond referendum items.
Can I I'm sorry, Ann, just for the record, the mayor has left the meeting, so he's no longer online, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you could include in your answer what the potential 5 years out of compliance, if there's any potential impact to the credit rating, that was.
Sure. We are assuming in the math here that the budget or the expenditures grow at 3.5% a year. So to the extent your budget grows at a higher rate, this will shorten, go away, depends.
I have one question from a macroeconomic perspective. So,
Steve, you need to put your mic closer.
Interest rates are still going up, and even a year from now, they should be around 4.5%. How does the rising interest rates affect our debt? Because is there let's say the economy does spiral out of control and we're not able to get inflation under control. We've got supply chain, all that stuff going on. Does that affect the bond revenue and the increase of debt for the town, or is it just kind of not? Because it doesn't even seem like it's factoring into this.
All of the debt you have on the books is fixed rate, so that is not going to change.
Okay.
The debt that you would be issuing in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we've run that at 5% interest rate. If you were in the market today, you would be at 375, 3.5, 360, 375-ish. So we've built some cushion into our interest rates with that expectation that we could see rates rising more. I wanted to address the question about the policy or the potential to be out of compliance. Where it would be a discussion is with the rating agencies, and their take on policies is that what they want to see is that there's a dialogue with the elected officials about the cause and effect of doing debt and capital on your policies. And if you were to be approving a piece of debt that was going to put you out of compliance, that in and of itself is not a problem. If that happened unknowingly and you had no clue about it, they would realize there's a disconnect. But if there's a discussion about it and a willingness for you all to say, we get it, we understand, we're not just going to raise our policy to make it work, right? We could go from 15 to 18% and the problem goes away. Yeah. But rather, it's a dialogue and say, we're willing to make an exception. We're going to get back into compliance in a few years. Mm-hmm. And for them, the rating agencies, that just demonstrates there's transparency and discussion, and they would not have an issue with that. Most highly rated communities like y'all, high growth, you need to rely on debt because you can't do it all with pay as you go. And so you tend to be at the higher end of the debt ratios. It's pretty normal. So let me finish up on case 1, column C, because I want to get to the affordability. Remember, I said you all are dedicating currently about $5.5 million per year towards debt service. But your current obligations are only around 4.2 per year, so you got a cushion. This level of debt will push you to a place where we'll need to find additional revenue on top of the $5.5 million. And we have measured it for you in pennies on the tax rate by year so you have sort of a frame of reference. So what this is telling you, if you did this plan the way it's sketched out, in 2027 you would need 0.3 pennies, a third of a penny worth of revenue. And then the next year you would need 2 pennies worth of revenue. And then 2029 you would be a little over a penny. So the whole program would need additional revenues coming into the model on top of the 5.5, equal to about 3.3 pennies worth of revenue.
Does that include the growth pattern year by year?
Where it pulls in growth is we're assuming that the value of a penny is growing at 3.5% per year. So any growth you see in your tax base above that will
Basically,
reduce it.
neutral reduce. Okay. So Jeannie, more for you. Like 5.2 is great. What you're projecting is that going to be like sustainable like the next 4 or 5 years, or is it? Do you think?
That's what I'm working on right now, because I need to understand where the peak is, because we experienced so much this year that's already been captured in our growth. So I need to see where is that going forward and what other projects are contributing that aren't yet online and accounted for in that existing tax base that I'm seeing right now for 23. So that's working with planning, understanding what might be coming through the door, what's already in the door, where it is in the pipeline, and whether or not it's already been captured. And running some scenarios that help me understand in terms of what they're estimating their additional value to be on that site, as to what kind of ad valorem monies that would be generating.
Yeah. So the point well taken. If we not for now, for later sessions, if we can, I'm looking at where this 3.5 will hit the ceiling. Because we can't sustain at 3.5 growth. What I mean to say, like, because we don't have much land left unless there's a redevelopment and those things coming in. So the last corridor is the Macroman or some, behind Breckenridge and other things.
TOD too.
TOD, but we are still far away. We don't
No,
even have a
I
plan
agree,
for it.
totally.
So keeping that in mind, if we can give a chart, like, in your
Yep.
thought process, that would be
Working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I was down on line 30, case 1, right? Over time, in this case, a 3-year increment, 27, 28, 29, we would need to bring in, identify in the model the equivalent of about 3.3 pennies worth of revenue. An alternative way to look at it is on line 32, which would be, what would it be if we did it all at one time in the FY25 budget? So you're working on 24 budget now, we're talking about a year from now. And rather than doing it piecemeal, you could do about 1.7 pennies in 25, and you get to the same place. You fund the same program. So it's just 2 different ways to think about getting to the same place. You're able to do it for fewer pennies because you're doing it earlier. And you're banking that money, take some budgeting discipline, which you all have, to sort of collect that 1.7 pennies worth of revenue, and then you're using it to supplement your debt service budget in the outer years. So just 2 different ways to look at solving for the same affordability.
So Ted, all these numbers that you're showing are only to decrease the death ratio, right? Nothing is projected if we have more staff and those kind of things.
This is
It's all
correct.
purely.
This is just the capital,
That's all.
not the operating. I think that's part of the later discussion.
Yeah.
So this is just the capital side, and in this case, it's just funding this 57.5 million.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in the model, we've aligned the tax equivalent up front with the reval year intentionally, just to give you an idea. In that opportunity where we right-size our tax-based value, what potential you may have and what that could look like with that decision point, instead of trying to align it to 2024.
So I have a question. This might be dumb, but this 1.72 tax equivalent impact, is that the amount we would need to raise our property tax for and that would be based on the bond referendum? That would be for our bonds?
This slate of projects at this current estimated cost. So not just the bond projects, because you prioritized 10, some of which you're gonna use bond proceeds for, some of which you're gonna use other types of financing or cash reserves for.
So projects cost have increased. Public Works is really the one that has moved the most between the time that we set the 3 cent in the original model. So it was that we could only afford at that point in that model, 16 million for that particular project to have the debt affordability within the 3 cents that council was willing to leverage. So that project has gone from, in this model, from 16, we're now capturing what we anticipate that cost at this time to 25 million. The other thing that is occurring that you have to understand, Michael, and you might want to take this from here, is the shifting forward of bond monies from 26 to 24. So you want to take it away?
Yeah, I can just briefly comment on that. So if you remember the original issuance timeline that we looked at, and I could just real quick go back to that. So for example, initially we had $5.5 million of the transportation bonds in 26. And the scenarios that Ted has been reviewing, we've accelerated all 5.5 million of that to 24. And then we've also accelerated Parks and Rec funding, so I think we've accelerated another 300,000. So the 6.9 that was here, we've accelerated another 300,000 to 24. So we have left 6.6 and 26. So it's factoring in accelerating, issuing that earlier than we had initially anticipated.
So is this 14 million down here, total amount required? Is that in addition to accelerate, can you go back to the?
Let me cover that for you.
Yeah,
That you under that case one, that was the third way that we measured the affordability, right? So if you want to circle like that 336, that's one way that funds the program, the 3.36 pennies, right? Alternatively, but that happens over time. Alternatively, you could do a one-time adjustment of the tax rate in 2025 of 1.7 pennies. Gets you to the same place. It funds the same program. And then thirdly, if you said, I don't want to raise the tax, I want to think about it in what kind of dollars do we need to bring to the table one way or the other, not equated to tax rate, from over the course of about 10 years, from 27 to 36, it would be about $14 million. Doesn't happen all at once, but it's sort of the additional dollars needed to fund this program. So it's 3 different ways to measure the affordability. Raising the tax over time at 3.3 pennies, raising it once at 1.7, or contributing additional dollars from wherever you get them over about a decade at 14 million.
Okay, wait, because that was not the question I was asking, or maybe it was, but, so the 5.5 million that we would accelerate, and then what was the other, the 6.9 that we would.
300K of
Can
the
I-
6.9.
That's what is being
Just
accelerated.
finish my question, and so I can ask, and you can tell me yes or no. The 6.9 million that you're saying we accelerate, and the 5.5, that equals what, 12 million? Does that 12 million go toward this 14 million? Or am I totally looking at it the wrong way?
It does not go to.
Okay. So this 14 million is what's needed in addition to accelerating the 6.9 and the 5.5. Okay.
So, but my concern is that when you talk about moving the public works out to 2026, right? I mean, we originally scoped that project at 16, then we blinked, and now it's 25. And I'm concerned that in 2026, when we look at this again, it's going to be 32. And if, God forbid, we push it out to
2029, it's going to be 40. Like, I mean, because I see that you've kept it at 25 million over the course of the next 6 years, pushing it out. But history doesn't suggest that that's going to be the way that's going to go. Like, you're going to be talking about even by 2026, you're likely to be talking about a cost escalation that may be significant. So I guess I'm saying there's a compelling argument for case one in that the numbers just get worse every time we push something out. So case three for staff was just to provide you an opportunity to look at that there could be choices if you don't align dollars to put those top items in to the timeline in which they need to occur. So case one, you're correct, is probably the most optimal timeline or the optimal case here to achieve the projects when we need them and to achieve as many of the priorities as you can from your top 10. And we're telling you in those cases how you could afford that. I've asked Ted intentionally to provide you case three in case there's concern about raising revenues in order to accomplish those and what that could look like. It could have been town center that you bumped to the bottom. It's just an illustration or a different perspective of choices and priorities and how you get there. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes,
It definitely
okay.
does.
But great observation and exactly what the conversation when we get to CIP, it's helpful to hear that information, that your input there, how you're taking that. It's going to help us build a CIP and how we leverage and use our debt and what resources we need to align to that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm looking at that correctly, because I don't claim to be the numbers person, but I'm right?
Yeah.
Okay, nothing stays the same price for a decade.
We are chasing numbers, and we have to, for this kind of modeling, Ted will tell you all these years, you have to take a snapshot in time, and that's what we're using, numbers that we have today, and trying to see where it fits. But we recognize it could escalate. So Ted, we are a little bit past our point for debt capacity and affordability. Are there any other key points in your wisdom in all these years that you would like to call out for council with these cases? Anything that we're missing to communicate that would be helpful to them?
No, I can't think of it. I think we've covered topics. I think the point about inflation is a good one. I mean, we're just very, very difficult to know where those costs are going to go. I think it's important to note this does not include on any operating costs associated with these projects. It's just the capital. But from our perspective, I realize when we start talking about tax rates, that's not an easy topic. But from our perspective, this is a very doable plan from a rating agency credit perspective. This is something I wouldn't worry a lot about what is this going to do to our debt profile or our rating. You have other things I know you want to consider in all of this, but this will not be problematic from a debt financing or rating perspective.
And that's what we need you to hear from an expert in the field, is that he's provided you with a worst case scenario. There's opportunity for it improving. We've experienced that firsthand already with the model when I said that it went from 19 when we originally did it in 21 for our debt service ratio back up to now 16 in this debt model. And we're rolling and trying to pull projects forward to align to your top 10. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Jean. But as long as we're also talking about what it also does not include, it doesn't include the projects we're currently working on that are going over budget too.
So that's a great segue into CIP, Michael. What do you think?
Sure. Ted's all set. I'm ready to move on.
Thank you, Ted. That was excellent.
Just take it to go home.
gonna run the slides for you if you need me.
I can handle that.
You can do both?
I can handle that.
Take us with you, Ted.
Am I dismissed?
I think, unless we have any more questions for Ted about our financial
Okay.
position,
All right.
no, thank you.
All right.
We love when you come.
Thank
Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank
No,
you.
we do, because you give us good information, and you also give us good historical perspective, too. So
Thank you all
thank
very
you.
much.
Drive
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you.
Take us with you, Ted. No.
Where's the tape?
All right, Michael, let's keep the group going. Let's go to our 5-year outlook.
Michael, you have 12 minutes.
No problem. So based on everything that we've talked about up to this point, we did want to just share with you a CIP outlook for the next 5 years based on all the information we talked about. This is not the CIP. This is not final at this point, but just where we're at with trying to align all of the debt resources that Ted just talked about, plus what we know that we have from a cash resource standpoint. So I'll just walk through kind of by year and just talk the projects. So obviously in '24, we have Town Center Phase 1, the intersection improvements, and then of course, factoring in, as mentioned earlier, the Airport Boulevard Extension Phase 1. We anticipate needing additional funding to cover a gap for that project and over, so that's why you see that in '24. Future Parkland acquisition, which is a bond-funded project, and then of course Crabtree Creek Nature Park. And that really, as we had shared, I think at the retreat, we anticipate that going over. The other challenge with this project is just with the Church Street Park overage that you all are familiar with. We've had to use some of the resources that we had anticipated for that project to make up that gap. So it's pushing the cash availability in the early years of the plan is really the impact of that overage. So it limits what we can fund from a cash standpoint in those early years of the CIP.
Can you give us later, not now, but the 22.3, how is it coming to 22.3? I just want to know.
Satish, you need to
Yeah.
talk into the mic, yeah.
I need a splits of the cost of town center and those bullet items.
We can provide that.
So can I ask a question, just for, this does not indicate anything, it's a question that I need to know. The Airport Boulevard Extension was a project to help get the flyover for the Airport Boulevard connection. And it was, with our partners, we were told that this extension, if we got it up and on the ground, that would help for funding for the flyover. But there is no funding for that flyover. So what if we put a pause on that project? What does that do? Is that even a possibility? And what does that buy us, if anything, and maybe nothing?
I think we could bring back a response to that question. I don't have
No, I
response
didn't
prepared, but
expect
that's
you to
something I
answer
think we
that,
can bring
yeah.
back.
And there's some things that we'll just have to do, probably an FAQ from tonight, or bring forward as we develop the CIP, then that's a good example that we'll have to collect some other information.
And just so I'm clear, that's an important project because it's a really important east-west connection that we need. So I'm not arguing the validity of that project, but the timing of it is, I wonder if it needs to be pushed forward at this time when there's no funding for a flyover.
But that actually says overage. Is that the bullet point, is that referring to the cost of the project itself? Or is that referring to overage above and beyond something that's already budgeted or already in progress?
It's funding for making up the gap between what we had anticipated the town share of the project would be and what we
Okay.
now expect. So
Right,
we've got to
okay.
provide additional funding to cover that gap.
Okay.
Good. So moving on to 25, and this is really first, one of the changes from last year's CIP is, or the current CIP, with the sidewalks, so that's pushed to so sidewalks phase 2 would be pushed in this scenario to 25. And really, that's where the Airport Boulevard overage is impacting that, because we're trying to cover that gap, and so something kind of had to give with addressing that gap, and so that's where we have the sidewalks being pushed. We're assuming the Public Works facility in 25, as you just saw in case 1, that Ted went over. So that's what we're looking at in this scenario, and you'll see the installment financing there assumed in 25. And moving into 26.
I got a question. In 2024, where does the dog park fit in there?
So the dog park is a project that we funded with ARPA funds. You've appropriated the funding for that. And we don't have the final cost for that project yet, but I know the goal would be to stay within that $1 million for the dog park.
If the sidewalks phase 2 are being funded out of cash reserves, why can't we do them in 2024? Like if we already have, doesn't that mean we already have the money?
Well, actually, part of the issue is, as I mentioned, some of the challenges with cash early on is that sidewalks phase 2 is utilizing some of the cash, the transportation reserve.
Oh, I
And
see.
so how the reserve works is you've got to have time to accumulate those funds. And
I see.
so with the cash that we're using in 24, I think we needed some time to accumulate enough to cover that project. And so moving to 26, this is kind of where we get into some projects that really factor timing with some other entities. So Cedar Fork Elementary athletic facilities, that's based on our current understanding of the school system's construction timeline as we coordinate with that. Then same thing for the betterment projects, which I think we previously shared, that's when the town would be anticipated to have to pay our share for the betterments. And then similarly with the existing Fire Station 2 widening impacts project. And then project that was not in your top 10, but something we would, anticipate potentially, starting to move forward is the Wake Tech Parkland, so leasing of the 18 acres and some parkland concept for that. So we have some design assumed in 26. And then in 27, parkland acquisition, so that's the bond-funded parkland acquisition project that we looked at, so that's the 6.6. And then we have intersection improvements, sorry, that would be, I think, phase 3. Apologies, that's 2 there. And then construction for the Wake Tech concept, and then moving into 28. The only difference in this project really in this scenario from Ted's case 1 is we don't have Fire Station 2 in this 5-year CIP in this scenario here. So what it would, the project now in 28 is the design for the Market Drive properties and parkland potentially there. So in total, 16 projects. It includes 8 of your top 10 project priorities. The Fire Station 2 project that I just mentioned, and then Town Center land acquisition would be the projects that are not included. And I already talked about the sidewalks. I did emphasize that these are just, or I should emphasize that these are the current cost estimates. Our final CIP would factor in some escalators. Of course, we know that's been an issue. And then, this is not the final CIP, but this is just kind of where we're at in the process right now. So with that, it is worth just talking a little bit about the projects that are not included, since you've all gone through the prioritization process and really shared input on these projects as well. So I won't go through the whole list, but you can take a look at those projects that are not in the CIP right now. And some of these are really, just would be further out anyways because of logistics or not having site control. So and then Aviation Parkway is just, that would be well into the future anyway. So some of it's really just timing as well.
The future basketball courts, I think it's deceptive. We are building 2 basketball courts as part of the South. So I would specify that.
Fair point, yeah, and we can note that, right, we have basketball court projects.
Otherwise,
Okay, I think we keep moving.
So just kind of final takeaways. And sorry, it is 8 of 10, as I just said. Sorry, that's just a typo here. So I think the first one is we discussed with Ted in some detail about the tax impacts. So just obviously that's a big takeaway with the public works facility in that scenario. Another thing to just keep in mind as we transition to the operating budget discussion, this does impact the draft CIP that we just looked at is counting on those different reserve contributions that you make on an annual basis for the CIP reserve, transportation and roadway reserve, and then the Parks and Recreation reserve. So it is relying upon the cash that is contributed. So just something to keep in mind. And then just a note about fund balance as well. So of course, and I know you hear this a lot probably from Jeannie, but preservation of fund balance is critical for us to address some of the things that we've been experiencing with cost overages, but also important for credit ratings and LGC work as well. So just now I want to turn it over to you all and really, I guess, you can see the questions here. What do you all need as we start to head into a recommended budget and CIP over the next month? And then, what priorities, if any, would you be willing to shift out if additional tax increment is not an option for the CIP? So,
Is it out of the question to see a ballpark of what the operational impacts are of some of the CIP projects?
No, I think that's something we can
Okay,
estimate and
I would
provide
be
for you.
interested in
Yeah.
that, if that's generally of interest.
The breakout that Satish requested before.
Yeah, certainly. I think, as you're earlier in the CIP, it's easier for us to estimate that. Some of those project concepts, like the Lake Tech Parkland or Markham, we don't have clear project scopes for that. We don't necessarily know what all that would entail and what kind of staffing might be required as we add additional parkland. So, but for the earlier projects especially.
So Michael, I want to be very clear. This number 2 question that you're asking is purely for CIP, not for any operating or personal or anything, right? That will be coming as a later different package.
Correct. I think that's accurate. Now, there's interplay, as I was just talking about with, for example, the reserves, the operating budget and the CIP we just looked at. But yeah, for now, we're just talking about CIP, and then you'll get to operating.
Yeah, that question's really just being transparent and relating it to what Davenport showed you with perhaps starting something in 2025, if the model continues to point that you need that, if you choose to do the projects that he demonstrated in case 1, for example. So that's just being transparent and correlating it to what you saw from Davenport.
So the question now that we all need to nod heads is, are we okay with this plan, knowing that there's a good chance during reevaluation that there'll need to be some capacity gained? And are we okay with that?
Yeah, I would say that's probably a fair question. It isn't that you're deciding you're raising taxes. It isn't that the plan's going to show that necessarily. It's just we're preparing you that there's the possibility on the horizon that might be a decision point you have in the future, and to be transparent about that in the communication of the debt capacity and the communication of the CIP. So thank you, that was perfect.
And are you going to talk a little bit about reevaluation at all, Jeannie, or is that going to come at some other time?
I can pull that in. I think Martha and I have actually talked about that might be important to start building, reminding you what that means.
Right.
And what you have to consider and what your authority is in those years.
So-
Maybe some preliminary insights maybe as to what we might see based on information today.
So was that what, and maybe you said this when I was just out, but was that what you were, was that your point when you were talking about the 1.72 cents, it occurring in 2025? Okay, that would be right after the reevaluation.
That you would do that with reevaluation, because then you're going to have your tax base will be adjusted to market conditions. You have a decision point by law that you have to make, whether you go or you have to project what revenue neutral is, and
every year you have the authority to set the tax rate. But you have a lot more information in a revow year
Mhm.
that gives you that opportunity to maximize it, not just for capital, but also even for your operations.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we're good with that? I think we're good with that. I think I saw head nods. So, okay, Michael, we'll keep moving.
Okay. All right, and then just one more slide on CIP. Just wanted to share a quick update and outlook on the stormwater CIP. So this does assume and include phase 2 of the planned ERU fee increase that was discussed as part of the budget process last year. So that's really, supporting the continued implementation of the stormwater master plan. The McCrimmon Parkway project, just a reminder, I think we had shared this previously, but DOT did pick up one of the projects as part of the flyover project, so they assume responsibility for that, so that's a benefit to us. That's coming out of the town CIP. One just quick change or update, I guess, on the order of projects in the CIP. This would accelerate the stream restoration project to phase 1, so you can see that in years 24 to 26. And that would be swapped with the Savannah subdivision and the Morrisville Carpenter Road culvert project. That would be the next project following the stream restoration, so that would be kind of moving into phase 2. Part of the reason for accelerating that stream restoration project is just getting that shovel ready. There's potentially a lot of grant opportunities with stream restoration type stormwater projects, because they're kind of focused on water quality, just a lot of grant opportunities with that.
So I think either at the retreat this year or last year, there was a lot of urgency around the Savannah subdivision, Morrisville Carpenter Road, because there's flooding along a stretch of that roadway that was not widened. So there's a portion from Savannah to Davis that is existing, that's just restriped, and that's the flooding portion. So moving it 3 years, do they anticipate the drainage to be okay through there, or?
May I ask if we can follow up and provide you information through FAQ to get you more details from Ben?
It was because they said it was very urgent, and now it's 3 years out.
Yes, so we've generally talked to them about the prioritization and the interest or the needs for the shift. But let me go back to Ben and get Ben's words and carry that forward to you so that you have a little more technical detail as to why he's made that decision. Would that be okay with you in council?
Because I know as we use this road even more and have more traffic, there may be reconsideration about the priority if there is additional flooding in the future. So.
Yes, and you will touch this every year for that very same purpose of bringing new information forward that might adjust it next year when we get to this same point. So I just want to make sure that that's clarity there.
Right. With the renovation, it wasn't clear if there was flooding because we were in construction for 2 years. But now with its new state, I do think the flooding may return because there's been no change.
And I think that what we heard is there might be needed time to observe and see if it did change. But let me get information from the subject matter expert that talks a little bit more about that for you at that level.
And if the tributary stream restoration can be funded with grants, then can we move Savannah subdivision and MCR back up to 2024? Because it's basically the same amount of money.
Right, I think that's another item I think we could talk with Ben about from a financial standpoint. That would definitely help. There's also the project management piece of that we could ask Ben about too.
For the purposes of this, we just wanted to make sure it's really referenced. We wanted to make sure that we at least put that possibility in front of you now and got sort of a quick take. And then you've given us some really good points that we need to go back to Ben and just talk with him about. We'll bring that forward as soon as we can.
Do you have a description somewhere of what the tributary stream restoration is?
I'll add that for you as well. We'll send that back out.
Yeah, at a high level, it's constructed wetland, stream realignment. I think there's a greenway extension component of it too, but we'll provide the detailed project scope response.
All right, keep moving.
All right.
Are we good? Maybe we should ask. It
That
sounds like we're
concludes
good.
the CIP discussion, so I'll make room, I guess, for.
Okay.
We're
There's
tagging
more.
in.
There is more.
What, now you get to go home
Thought
too?
it were over. How many slides are there?
Well, I should do that for you.
19 more.
Okay, so let's see if, which one is this one, this one, this one? Okay, you handle that one, I'll handle this. All right, so I'm gonna try to do this quickly. Can I have you for 30 minutes? Do you want me to try to cut it just as quickly as possible? I think the all intents and purposes of this new work session at this particular time was just to give you some insight and outlook as to what we're seeing right now. It's not numbers yet. We're still working on that. But we wanted to get a feel, if anything, how we took your information, your brainstorming from retreat, and trying to put it into motion. That's the sense that I want to try to at least connect some dots. What we heard from you, why we think it was important, and want you to hear from us that we're using it to guide us forward. Can we achieve everything? Maybe not necessarily, but can we achieve something that gets us towards really what your ideas and your interests are? So if we can do maybe 20 minutes.
Let's shoot for 9:30. That gives you 21 minutes.
Okay, hold me accountable.
I will. I sat here purposely so I could see the clock.
I like that.
If anything, we could probably skip the part where you tell us what we said.
We would.
Because we were there. We were
Not
there.
to be disrespectful, we were there, so I mean, I saw it, it's great stuff, but, you know,
As long as you get the point. We heard you in very many ways, and I had such fun. I had such fun with your Post-its and had such fun trying to make it connections to really what staff's work is. So just saying, this is a fun thing. And if this tells us a story, there you go. That was just the
Good
fun
job.
part. So this is really the basis of what's carrying us forward.
Can you
And
change it here?
oh yes, my Vanna is coming back. All right, so another slide here, and Martha and I, we tend to tag team this. So Martha, please jump in if you feel there's something you want to emphasize here as she leads this as the budget officer in getting us going and building a budget. So really a lot of things from the emphasis and the actions. I'm not going to go through everything there, but there's really some core topics that you'll see that we're working on that we heard directly from you. Smart shuttle, affordable housing, really optimizing base budget. We're doing a lot of work on base budget this year and really validating and making sure that we can leverage the resources you've already given us in the best way possible, and really digging into our authority levels and trying to see if there's other opportunities even in user fees that might help us moving forward. And again, brainstorming to planning to outcomes is what this is all about. So really important to touch on a few things here when it comes to the influences and what we're looking at. Cost of business is going up, and there's lots of factors associated with that. Pandemic is still lingering in one in particular department, that's Parks and Recs, and some of their programs and getting people to come back. Our recurring needs are growing, and we need to pull that front and center. We need more in operations to keep the lights on, to keep the quality of service as it is. We can't defer. Deferring is not a wonderful option because all you're doing is kicking the can down the road. And you're limiting the ability to actually provide the service, the level of service that you expect as it exists today if we do those things. So we don't like those strategies necessarily, but they are there and something we may have to work with or try to look at how we get around that. Strong focus on programs. We heard this from you about real benefit to the community. That's reevaluating how we do it and what we do it for and what the benefit to the community is. Can't say enough about preservation of your reserve. That's your general fund balance because you're going to need it because the cost of business is going up. You're going to need it. We've already talked about actually needing that for some of your capital projects. You're going to potentially need it for the future to demonstrate that to credit rating agencies that you have the ability to mitigate these unforeseen circumstances that they know the economy is generating. And for us to have that leverage and that ability and hold on to it is probably going to be an important factor the next time we get in front of the credit rating agencies, which will be in '24, is what we anticipate. Creative solutions to advance work. That's all this is about, is we've got to think about things differently, approach them, be eyes wide open, but recognize doing that we might be creating also or adding to work streams. So we need to pay attention to our resources of people, how we re-energize the ones that we have, how we actually draw people that we don't have but need. I'm not going to touch on this one other than I just wanted to give you a picture of we talked about obligations in the past. These are things we have to do. There are things that we need to keep going, and those increases have to be accounted for as we develop a budget. So again, not going to go over them, but other than to say street maintenance, you told us, is extremely important as an example. We need to bump that back up to really restore it to that 2 million level. That's that proactive approach. That's just an example of us putting those actions, but it takes money out of your operation budget that we have to, and your new resources that you have each year to work with. So it's drawing and draining on that. These inflationary or cost to do business is going up. It's impacting us with these things that we have to continue. So Martha, you might want to jump in on this one. Staff resources, again, it's another obligation. The basics is we need to make sure we keep pace with the market. That's the primary driver here. And that folds in not just merit. It could be a cost of living increase. It could be also staying competitive with our market adjustments and our classifications of jobs. We also have obligations. Inflation is hitting our benefits. Healthcare, it does come at a cost, and to provide healthcare is a motivator for our organization. It's a recruiting tool to keep the type of program that we have, but we have to account for in our annual budget how that grows and increases. And then obviously, a senior group is we worry or work towards trying to understand how we can do workload management better and balance that for our employees and those that we want to come work for us. And understanding these challenges with recruitment and how that affects us at different levels, not just the full-time level, but our part-time level. We have to think outside of the box on this. We have to reinvent the wheel here to get people to come to work at our facilities, to be able to manage and operate these services, these programs that we have at the level that you expect, and to maintain them. And we've got to really put something out there that works to create that draw and reinvent that wheel there. Martha? Good. Again, another slide is just to illustrate that we got major programs and they come at an inflationary cost in the future years. And these are the four that I touched on that I think resonate with this council that are important to you. But we have to account for cost escalation to deliver this service. This is the existing services. This is what we plan through master plans for sustainability, for example, and making sure that we take the resources in this next year and align it to the things that are obligations, that are important major programs, and continue those. This is the keep the light switch on as it exists today conversation. Okay. All right, so here you should see, and this is what I love, is that you should see your words floating back at you at this point. You told us creating destination was an important idea, welcoming programs, innovation, fundamentals, and I'm sorry, we changed the reference to sexy projects to getting ahead of the curve. I know y'all like that. So as we look at budgets and we look at things that departments are trying to bring forward and things we hear from you from your brainstorming, I tried to put some buzzwords to help you get a feel what that might mean in a 2024 budget. And hopefully we're hitting the mark. It's not everything. You're going to get more depth of understanding when we settle this all out, when your manager prepares a balanced budget. You're going to get more of that feel and that connectivity back, hopefully, to what you started at Retreat.
And before Jeannie leaves this slide, I will mention, as we finish up tonight, I've got a separate memo about our economic development agreement, just because of the timing of that contract, and sort of where we're at in evaluating that. I want you to know what our plans are. So I'm just gonna hand you that to read. I can send it electronically as well as we finish up tonight.
Okay, so doing great things and having wonderful ideas, now we gotta align resources to it. So what's the playbook this year? The playbook for me, as always, is the strategy matters for the long game. That I don't look at just a single year. We look in budget at really the long game and how we can create that sustainability. This year in tax base, we are evaluating that very hard because we know we had an opportunity with the Crimin Corridor, and we see the development occurring already in this year. It's hitting the books this year. What is it gonna do for next year? And can I take a stronger stance on that growth rate? And then how long can I take that stance to be able to build resources into this year's budget to realize more of your ideas, or even to take care of the simple obligations that are already part of the base budget that are growing. The other thing is recognizing that you have in the future this revaluation opportunity. We've talked about that. I don't need to say anymore. That's looking farther than this fiscal year that's coming up. I'm trying to identify really what major revenue sources other than your tax base or your ad valorem that I can take a more aggressive approach where reasonable. So your next largest source is sales tax. There's a lot of conversation, and Michael will tell you he sees the same conversations he's been a part of, is the budgeteers in Wake County are trying to get a handle on where's the economy taking this in the future. It is a great resource right now. It's performing amazing, but it actually is now showing a trending down and slowing down. And so we have to make sure that we manage this effectively. And just because it had grown in the first part of the year at 20% doesn't mean that's realistic to project going forward to 24 and beyond. So we've got to be managing that and looking at it and seeing if we can take some aggressive approach reasonably, but not put us at risk. And there's other revenues that I'm assessing and analyzing that are state distributed revenues that we may or may not have opportunities. But that's always a part of the solution in playing that long game and leveraging, where do you set that bar? We talked about being smart, again, sales tax, optimizing user fee authority. You're not gonna get a lot of money coming from your user fees generally, but at least it's important to know what they're generating, how the activity works. Is it really set and established at the rate that it needs? Because it is a part of your authority. It does contribute to the overall picture. So it's important to take a pause and look at it and really see, are we missing on an opportunity? It could be a decision that council, you might not want a user fee associated with a certain program. Maybe it is more of a quality of life thing. That's at your discretion, but we have a responsibility to evaluate it and bring forward ideas and solutions as a part of the whole package. It isn't just a one thing. It all works and it's all intertwined. ARPA, you heard from Michael, ARPA is a potential use of one time. Your 4.6 is something we're gonna have to leverage in this year. We've got a time limit on it. Projects have to be finished before a certain time. So this is gonna be a big piece for 24 as to where it goes. Does it help us with capital? Does it really need to help us for some one-time things in 24 for operations? Possibly. Staff will work on developing those and aligning what resources align with what strategy and the best approach. Other resources, we have opportunities for street payment in lieu, parkland payment in lieu, and of course we could do some things with the accumulated resource with MSD. Can we afford to pay for that project now? No, but we can potentially get it shovel ready, for example, meaning we can design it. And at least then we'll know how much it really costs. So we have other resources is what I'm saying that we look at. Another strategy I always like to leverage is I love to watch projects complete. Because what does that mean to me? Is I'm looking and analyzing, are there any available resources in that existing project? Is it ready to close? Can I move them to another street project? So Morrisville Carpenter Road, for example, may have some available funds, may not have some available funds, but it's ready to potentially close. So I'm going to be watching it very carefully, analyze it. Can I shift it to some other project that's transportation related or anything else that we need it for? Depending on what the funding sources are is also important. So I think that's really all I'm going to cover on this particular slide, other than just restating again. There's other strategies that I've noted there that are really important. It's not one size fits all. It's a combination of things that work and intertwine together to make the magic happen. And this is where I get excited. On the horizon in 2025, talked revaluation already. I do want to point out revenue structure changing. What does that mean? That's exactly what Councilmember Garamella was talking about and a couple of others, is we need to pay attention to how development activity is transitioning. We need to get a handle on, is 3% average growth rate valid? What does revaluation do? What do these other big activity centers that are coming online, and when do we anticipate those to come online? And what might they bring in tax-based growth in the future? And it's all about the long game and the big picture. Your next activity center after McCrimmon is going to be Town Center. And then I get all excited about TOD every time I see that. And the other night I was geeking out on that presentation a lot, thinking about the analysis of how the tax base could grow from that one singular revenue generating engine. Just as Park West did for us years ago when it turned from Andrex into that activity center that it is today. TOD could potentially be serving that for us in the future as a redevelopment site. Again, a pandemic, obviously we've got hurdles there. I do want to mention space needs, and the word there is lingering. We do have something we're going to have to deal with in August of 2024 with Parks and Rec's current lease running out, and there's no option for renewal. I'm just saying that out loud. More discussion to have about that. We don't need to fixate on it other than we want to be transparent and put it out there. We do have space needs across the town. All right. So here are just some prompting questions that you don't necessarily have to answer tonight, but they're things that I want you to consider as you look at this outlook, communicating with the manager. I know you have one-on-one potential check-ins with them, pushing information forward of what you need to see, what a good balanced budget looks like to you. That would be really helpful to get that insight as we pull the numbers together, as we try to align to your ideas. Just think about that. That's a take-home thing. You don't necessarily need to respond to that tonight unless you just have something you gotta tell me. And I think from there, I'm gonna pass it over to Martha. Any thoughts?
And I'll just ping off of what Jeannie has said. A lot of information, late on an evening. Right now, you've got an April 11th council meeting and then an April 24th council meeting. And at the April 24th council meeting, you will have your next substantive budget presentation, which is where we formulated a budget. And that's really our last touch before we're actually finalizing and presenting it. Your current slate of items, current for April 11 is an approximate 2-hour council meeting.
So 5.5 hours then? Yeah, exactly.
So
That's where I was
that
going.
does not include at this point that Church Street Southern Lot does have to get added back to that. So taking that into consideration, do you want us to just put a placeholder work session for you to just talk about what you've taken in tonight? It's just your only option. If you're fine, great, we'll walk away. But that's the option. If you don't want to discuss any further tonight and do want to discuss, that's your place to do that.
I
Be
need to
okay with like a
digest.
strictly time-boxed work session. I don't want to have a work session where I just go around and around and look at the same slides and say the same things.
That I do not. I would take an hour maybe and just to talk about what we heard tonight.
So would these 3 questions be a good place to start then? Instead of rehashing everything? I'm with you on the rehashing everything.
It's a good place to start, these 3 questions.
And then by then you'll have some of your community feedback in a report. And you could start aligning really, are your values similar to community's values as we threw out your brainstorming ideas? So you would have it at that same time as well. I tried to give you just at the snapshot that I had for this agenda item, just really what we're seeing right now, but I'm going to capture it all and give it to you via email, or I can just make it a part of the 11th.
Okay, this was not the online portal survey information that's closing tomorrow.
It's closing tomorrow, so it's a snapshot of it as of the day that I needed to get this into peak. It's not the closed out piece, and then there's some other things that we're running up to the 31st. I want to capture that information as well and synthesize it for you. I think it'll be of value to you.
I just had one, just an ask, if you could, I'm just curious that, I've been hearing from some developers that because of people not returning back to work, that there's just an increasing amount of vacant office space. And one of these developers said that if you go by Perimeter Park, it's like looking like a ghost town. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm gonna drive through my.
It's true.
Okay. If that's, here's my ask of you, if you could prepare some information about what that would do with our tax base if, you know, people start vacating offices, they don't go back, will that devalue the office property? And will that negatively impact our tax base and revenue, or to what extent? Doesn't sound like it, that our growth rate's gone from 3 to 5%, but I'm just curious as to how that impact is, because I
I'll
don't.
give you some talking points.
Okay.
And that, your reval is gonna hit at that time to take some of those factors into consideration.
Yeah, and then, well, don't forget the reval. You know, it's been these last 4 years where property values have escalated too. So, but to your point, it's kind of steadied now, and is it lower? Is it, you know, we won't know.
But people are gonna feel like their taxes are gonna double because the price of their homes have doubled. And that's not true, because we're gonna have to set it to revenue neutral. There'll be quite an education with.
There is every time we do reevaluation.
Right,
because
right.
Yes.
But this time, it's like,
Yes, and this time, well, I was here back in the 2008, 2009 timeframe when it really escalated, because it was an 8-year window. It was, I think it was
that's right,
2000
it was
to 2008.
it was less frequent.
And that
right.
8-year window here was astronomical, and it was very difficult conversation. That's why I'm really glad they're 4-year revaluations now. At least you kind of level set on an ongoing basis.
But the commercial real estate value is very relevant for the
Yeah,
discussion.
no, totally.
So I'll add that. That's already on the list.
Jeannie, for the FAQ, I think just a really high level,
That's what I'm.
the appraisal process and when that happens, and when it hits, and when people get their notices, and all the, just how it all works, just a refresh in the FAQ, I think would be great for council. And then I guess we can talk tomorrow about an FAQ being ready for an April 11th meeting or not. I would just encourage you, don't start talking about stuff. Talk about your philosophical approach to the budget. Continue the way you did at the retreat, because you have staff that incorporates that with the stuff.
And hopefully we demonstrated we did that. We incorporated your words and carrying that forward. You guys do great, but you always do great, frankly. I mean, I've only done it
Except for
4
that
times,
last
but I mean,
category. She changed the name.
yeah, I don't like that.
All right,
You're not
thank you,
even sure
Jeannie.
which
Thank you, Michael. You two did a fabulous job, and you
Thank
did
you,
it.
Michael.
You did it in 90 minutes, so
You're
that's
adding
pretty darn good.
Did
Okay.
we make 90?
So did we get concurrence that we'll add a 1-hour work session on April 11th for budget discussion?
So I would say make it 30 minutes, but we can never do anything in 30 minutes. I'm afraid if we say an hour, it'll go an hour and a half.
Is there any way to say, like, I don't want to be a jerk, but Tuesday is a super long day for me. Is there any way that we could do like an hour work session contingent on the meeting ending on time or something like that? Because if the meeting goes until 10 o'clock, I don't want to do an hour.
This is always in your purview.
Oh.
I mean, this is always in your purview to, councils have deferred work sessions before. That has occurred.
Yeah, we adopt the budget,
Gave her
and
an idea.
we adopt the budget. We adopt the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, obviously, but yes, we have, as the meeting has gone, we've punted things. We have said, move it. Yes.
What does the agenda look like for the April 25th?
So it's April 24th, a Monday. We're not starting till 6:30. You've got a budget review. So if you wait till April 24th, this will not be a necessary session because we are working full steam ahead on a budget at this point. You've got a major update in Town Center Development Services Agreement.
That's 30 minutes.
And I would just put the questions up. The session is yours.
Okay.
Good
Is
job.
that good?
I'm not clear. I'm not clear on what council has agreed to.
30 minutes.
On
30
April 11th.
minutes on April 11th, which means we'll probably go over by 15 minutes or so, but that's okay. 30 minutes.
We got to make sure TJ is aware of our agreement. Tonight.
If not, we just committed a mutiny.
And we're just going to answer those 3 questions. It's going to be just focused. We are not going to rehash everything we just went over tonight because this was really good, by the way. I've seen this many times, obviously, but this was really good. And it's always good to hear again, especially Davenport. They do a great job. But we're not rehashing everything
All right,
tonight.
30 minutes. There's 7 of us. I'm just pointing out that that's 4 minutes each. So how are we, do a timer, timers on our phones, like how we.
I
how
put
we
a duct
enforce it?
tape on mine. You
Shot.
can take my phone.
He did all this talking tonight and Tuesday night, so.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, I want to make sure that we're clear. Are you clear now, Martha? Is everything good? Jeannie clear? Everybody clear? Okay, I'll entertain a motion
Second.
to adjourn. All those in favor?
Who
say-
made the motion?
Ann
I did.
and Satish.
No, I did.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm
It's a
so,
real motion.
I'm so sorry.
wasn't a
I'm so
question.
Sorry. Okay, obviously I'm tired. Vicky made the motion.
Yes.
I seconded,
And-
Satish thirded.
Ann seconded, Satish
You can have a
thirded.
tie.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? We're good to go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
So let me give you this memo.